Hi, welcome to the Clive Barker podcast. This is episode 48, Weaveworld. So, Weaveworld Part 1, because we weren't able to get the whole thing squeezed into one episode. It was good to talk about Weaveworld, and I think, in the first episode, I think we got a little bit too bogged down with the details of the plot here, but in the next one, we really kind of found our stride, and I think did justice to this book, which is really good. So anyway, that's episode 48, Weaveworld Part 1. Enjoy.
Welcome to episode 48 of the Clive Barker podcast. Today our main topic is Weaveworld, and we are Jose, and I'm Ryan.
Hi guys.
Hey. So in the news, Clive Barker said that I think we mentioned last time that the Chiliad meditation stories were getting put into a book by Subterranean Press.
Yes.
Well, the same thing is happening with Six Destinies: The Tortured Souls story.
Exactly, and they were supposed to be stories that were going to come out in Black as the Devil's Rainbow, Tales of a Journeyman. But now it seems like Black as the Devil's Rainbow is going to be the name for a poetry compilation.
Yeah.
For which Clive worked with his assistant Alex.
Yeah.
And he helped out to pick the poems. So it seems like Tales of a Journeyman is no longer Tales of a Journeyman, it's just Black as the Devil's Rainbow. And it seems like some of the stories they were going to make into the book are now being released separately.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, which is, are they going to do this for more stories? Because it's going to get expensive really quickly if they do.
He could do a Books of Blood Volume 8. That would be if that would be really, I think marketing wise, that would be really smart. Volume 7, I mean, but I don't know if that would actually happen. But
oh, you mean actually use the name Books of Blood Volume 7?
Yeah.
Sure, I could see that.
I mean,
but
those volumes were bookended. I mean, with those stories, with the Book of Blood and the postscript.
The only concern that I have in this situation is there really going to be a book of short stories or not? Or is this going to be they're just going to release the best or more well-known stories that have never been compiled
and I wonder,
separately? Or are they still going to have, like, a core volume of short stories?
And I wonder, too, if someone at some point someone had decided that you shouldn't mix short stories and poems together in the same book. Because there were always going to be, I mean, not always, but the last thing that we had heard before about Black as the Devil's Rainbow is that it was going to have short stories and poems.
Sure, I remember reading that, yeah. First it was just going to be short stories.
Yeah.
Then it was going to be short stories and poems. Now it's just a book of poems.
Yeah.
So for you people out there who like Clive Barker's Books of Blood and short stories, I guess you're going to have to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah, so I wonder if Chiliad was supposed to appear in there too.
I think so, and also the stories from Pigeon and Teresa.
Oh, yeah.
I think there is more than one story of Pigeon and Teresa, and which someone made a theater play out of last year, I think. And then there was going to be a story about the internet, which apparently Clive Barker had written. There was going to be a story called Grail, right? Right, Grail, that was going to rewrite the story of Christ. And
Nativity, yeah.
Yeah, and Chiliad was going to be there, and I think a few more stories like on Amen's Shore, and those stories that we talked about on an earlier episode of the podcast. I was really looking forward to it, but hey, if it's going to be a book of poems, that's good too.
Well, and if Subterranean Press is willing to make a hardcover volume of Tortured Souls, I would think that they would do anything. I mean, that's not to say that Tortured Souls is bad. It's not bad, but I think it's a brave choice. I mean, it's a series of little stories that appeared on Todd McFarlane toys.
Right. It was called Six
Destinies.
Six Destinies,
yeah.
And wasn't it also subtitled like The Legend of Primordium?
Mm-hmm.
Right. We discussed that story in an earlier episode, and we were kind of in agreement that it was kind of a strange story in the sense that you didn't really. It was kind of like you didn't really know what time period was it supposed to happen, or because there were like mobsters. Yeah, there was like things that seemed like ancient Rome with senators and palaces, but then there were like mobsters and cars and things. So
but nobody had guns; they had swords and It's just
it was strange. Let's see. Like you said, it's a brave choice. Definitely, a lot of people who collect Tortured Souls and who know about that will definitely be rushing to get that. I hope.
And Clive Barker fans will get it, and maybe horror fans will. I don't know. I just
sure
it's.
From these stories, the one I was most interested in was On Amen's Shore because I never read that story before.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm also interested in reading Chiliad because I think, like, what you told me about Chiliad was that it was supposed to be this really complex story where all the gods manifest all of a sudden on Earth and stuff like that. And there was like
in the second part,
And there's like this guy who's even contemplating suicide, but then he thinks maybe not because one of the passing messiahs will just raise me from the dead if I kill myself. So there's no point. So I'm looking forward to reading that, and I just don't know when I'm going to be able to read the rest of the other stories. But hey, a book of Clive Barker poetry is also a good news. Anything by Clive Barker is good news.
Yeah.
And the first book that I actually read Clive Barker's poetry from is the book that we're discussing today, which is Weaveworld.
Right, yeah.
Which I think was one of the first books that he wrote that actually had poems in it.
Yeah. So that, I mean, and he's a good poet, and it'll be really interesting to see Black as the Devil's Rainbow in that incarnation. There may be people who are disappointed, because we've been hearing about Black as the Devil's Rainbow for probably 10 years.
Maybe more. But, I mean, I've been hearing about the Scarlet Gospels collection of short stories for more than 10 years.
Right, and that's what it started its life as, the Scarlet Gospels.
Yeah, and then the Scarlet Gospels eventually got taken over by the story with Damour and Pinhead.
Yeah.
And then it just became something else, became a nameless anthology, and then it would become Black as the Devil's Rainbow, and then it became Tales of a Journeyman, Black as the Devil's Rainbow.
I still sort of hold that I think ignorance is bliss. Which is sort of sort of ironic, because if we hadn't been hearing about these things for the last 10 or 15 years, one of those books comes out and we just find out about it when it comes out, and but here we are reporting the news. So I mean, I can't complain too much.
Yeah.
The next thing, Mr. October. So there's an anthology in memory of Rick Hautala, and I have to admit that I don't know who that person is. But Mr. October is an anthology in Clive Barker's story Tom Requiem is going to appear in there. So, and when we had talked about rare stories, we talked about the what is that? What are those called? The Infernal Parade.
Mm-hmm.
And And I don't remember them having stories. I thought they had like little bios.
Maybe that's what he's referring to. Maybe he's expounded more on those little bios.
Well, and I thought it was a new story, and I said something about that when Phil and Sarah posted this story on Facebook, and they said, no, it's the story, from they said, no, it's the story from Infernal Parade.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being republished.
I'm sure that Clive must have come up with detailed stories of those characters before they decided to sculpt them in as little action figures, so I'm sure that he must have built all this backstory for them.
Because I thought I remembered you and I kind of reading the little blurbs about these characters.
Yeah, it was on the website.
Yeah, but so there must
Toys.
be more that's packaged in with the figures in terms of the story than what we knew about.
I never got the Infernal Parade, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, me either. But that's interesting news. I mean, that's a whole set of stories that I didn't even realize existed.
Right, right. So that's going to come out. Is going to come out in an anthology called Mr. October.
Yeah, and that, you know, I think that would be a little maddening to get that and then have that one story when you know that there's like 5 of them.
Sure.
Or I don't know how many of those there are, but
there were the other characters like what was the name of the girl? There was a female character of the Infernal Parade. She was called like what was the name of that woman that had like the fever that she spread to other people?
Was it Charlotte Fever?
No, like Typhoid something. Wasn't there like a character called Typhoid Mary? No, maybe I'm thinking of something else. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Well, there's also Tortured Souls 2, and it's hard to keep those straight.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure out there's some person out listening to this who might have all the action figures in a curio cabinet and is thinking, "No, what are you guys talking about? You don't know anything."
They're beating their fists on their iPods.
I'm sorry.
Yelling at us. Yeah, sorry. Neither one of us have really collected those figures.
No.
Yeah, and in fact, when I mentioned that I didn't realize there were stories in those, Phil and Sarah said on Facebook, "Oh, time to dust off your collection of those toys and take a look." Then and I was like, "I don't really have those."
Hence why you didn't know about the stories.
Yeah. I mean, if I did have them, I would have opened them because that's the way I am. I don't really, really keep stuff in the plastic.
Oh yeah. I just have I have like a few of those Hellraiser figures from NECA, and I did open up most of the ones that I bought, but then there was a point where I just got a few, and I never bothered to open them because I was like, well, I'll just keep these like they are because I guess I had like Barbie, the Cenobite, and Angelique and stuff, and I was like, I'll just keep these unopened because you can read everything in the back of the box anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bought a lot of Godzilla figures when I was in Japan, and first thing I did was pull the tags off, and then later on, that was like in '95, and then later on I find out on the internet you're not supposed to remove the tags, so they probably lost some value.
Yeah, I was just looking at I'm sorry, this is off topic, but I was just looking at some of the toys that they release in Japan and stuff like Bandai toys.
Yep.
And they can be pretty expensive and pretty valuable on eBay.
Yeah. I have the Biolante one, which is worth about $250 now.
Oh boy!
And the 8-inch scale ones are really valuable, but the 6-inch ones are not quite as much.
Right.
But I have a Megalon and Space Godzilla. Because Space Godzilla, that movie was out, was new in the theaters when I was in Japan.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not the Godzilla podcast, unfortunately. But we can. Oh, so our next news. I don't know. It's not such a big deal, I guess. But Shout Factory and Scream Factory will be releasing Nightbreed: The Cabal Cut. I'm just kidding. It is a huge deal.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Finally. So we're also the official podcast for Occupy Midian.
Yes.
If people didn't know. This is huge because, all those people who come on and don't believe us that we're an official movement and that we're, they're actually working with Morgan Creek and that it was in talks and it was getting put together. Now there was an official announcement by Scream Factory at San Diego Comic-Con.
Yes, they had a panel there where they had Mark Miller and they announced that, it's coming from Scream Shout Factory. It's coming in 2014. They're gonna do the restoration for the film, and they're gonna release it in DVD for sure, but I think also Blu-ray. the details are still kind of hazy because there's still that deal just went through like on the 19th of this month.
Yeah,
it was literally like hours before the announcement.
And Mark was like walking around Comic-Con when he got the announcement that he had to be at that panel in like half an hour or something crazy like that. He put it on Twitter. Right before, he's like, for some reason, he's like, I was just told I need to be at this Scream Factory panel.
Yeah.
So, we follow everything. So we're like, oh my God, but we couldn't, we didn't want to give it away, even though we kind of had an idea that that's what the announcement was, why else would he be there?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, this was great news. Everybody's celebrating on the Occupy Midian Facebook group. Just awesome. And there was one guy on there that sort of like was like, how do you know? And where are you getting this information from? And I kind of, and this was after a bunch of people had just posted the links and, and stuff like that. And I kind of lit into him a little bit, and I feel bad because he like deleted his Facebook account.
Whoa! Really?
Yeah. He sent me a private message apologizing, and I tried to write back, and Facebook wouldn't let me. So, sir, if you're listening, I am really sorry. There's 7,000 people on there, and we get people constantly doing that. And
truth be told, I understand why you kind of laid a little bit into it, because it was like people said, Clive Barker just announced it. Here's the announcement by Clive Barker himself. They linked him, and he was like, yeah, but I've heard Clive Barker announce that several times. How do I know this time it's true?
Yeah.
And I was like,
And he said, are you saying that because you have a link or some kind of a fact, or are you just trying to sound authoritative? Which that kind of really irked me a little bit, because my post was just like a cheerleading kind of a post. I just said, the Nightbreed has been found, and Nightbreed has been saved, and Nightbreed is found and
the Cabal
healed
Cut
and
has been
saved
found,
from its enemies.
Saved. Yeah, that's it.
And I didn't put a link there because we had a bunch of other posts where people were already linking it, so I didn't feel like I needed to cite my source, because you just scroll down a little bit.
It was a very happy day, a very exciting day, and we were like following it almost in real time.
Yeah.
And we were like talking to each other through private messaging. We were like, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be the announcement!" And we had been speculating about this like on the last episode.
Yeah.
And we're like, "Yeah, maybe it's going to be the announcement." And then we started putting like 2 and 2 together, and we were like, "Oh God!" Then finally it came out, and Clive Barker announced it, and we were all very happy because Occupy Midian was, fan movement that attached itself to the official people working on the Cabal Cut, and basically what we've been doing for the last year and a half is like getting this information out to the fans and just trying to get them to realize that this movie has been found and is being put together. And, the Nightbreed that you guys should have seen is finally on the verge of being released. So, good job, Russell Charrington, Jamie Johnson, Mark Miller, Michael Plumides.
Yeah.
You guys made it happen.
And I've been thinking a lot about Occupy Midian lately, and I think, originally I just ran to my computer to tell you guys about that name, because my thinking was, if we didn't, and I felt sort of frustrated because I didn't have a computer with me, just my iPad, and it's kind of like, if we don't get this domain name, somebody else is going to get it and cyber squat it, and then it's going to become nothing. And I thought, we should buy this and give it to Russell, or give it to Clive Barker, or give it to Mark Miller, and that was kind of the original idea. And then but then it turned out, Russell had already bought it. Well, what about Facebook? And so, then we talked about that, and you and Roger got that started. Roger did the Facebook, and you did the petition. Because Phil and Sarah had said, forget the old petition, why don't you start a new one?
Yeah, because they didn't even know about the other petition. It was someone made it up.
Yeah.
And they were like, it had like 900 signatures on it over the last 3 years.
It was 3 years old.
It was made in 2009, which is back when Mark Miller found the tapes, sent them to Phil and Sarah, and they converted from PAL to NTSC so they can mail it back to to Mark Miller, and when
there wasn't so much buzz about the Horror Hound screening because it wasn't a movie. It was the footage all kind of jammed together.
Yeah, like Russell said, they still had the leader reels, and which is that thing where you got like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it starts. And then there were like a lot of like moments in the tape where there was nothing, just static. So they had to like basically what he did was he chopped it up in little bits and scenes, got the script out, and it was like, okay, this scene should go here, that scene should go there. So him and Jimmy Johnson, which I think was one of his students at the time, they kind of started assembling the first version of the Cabal cut. When he showed it to Clive, he ended up in tears.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful story right there. Well, and that's how this whole thing got started.
And Mark Miller was right that diehard Clive Barker and Nightbreed fans would want to see that footage. But the problem is that it's not necessarily people at Horror Hound want to see that. So I think that was the issue there. And I was kicking myself that I never went to that. But I just couldn't justify, at the time. And so then later on, it was like, okay, well, now's my second chance. When and then I'd already bought my tickets, and we found out it wasn't the Horror Hound stuff; it was an actual movie.
Yeah, it was. That whole thing, I think it didn't really raise a lot of eyebrows because even though it did make the runs on the usual websites, like every major website and the horror film news network, they were like carrying the story like, oh yeah, well, in Charlotte, North Carolina, they finally screened those VHS tapes. Quality's kind of rough. Well, let's see if we can find it. These are just work prints, and everybody was like waiting on it. And then the news kind of died out over the next 3 years until 2012.
Or Horror Hound was in Indiana, I think.
Wait, wasn't the first screening in Charlotte, North Carolina?
No, that's where Mad Monster Party was. That was the first screening of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, right. So Horror Hound was the first screening of the VHS footage. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not sure about Russell's numbering system, if that counts as version 1 or...
Right. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, version 3 is what we saw at Horror or Mad Monster Party, I think.
In any case, the good news is Scream, Shout, Factory, because it's pretty much the same thing. They're interchangeable, the names. It's Scream Factory or Shout Factory. They are going to release the film. So far, it seems like they will only release the Cabal cut. There won't be the theatrical cut combo pack in there.
And that's due to some kind of rights issues with the theatrical cut and either Warner Brothers or 20th Century Fox.
Right, because I think if I'm correct, and if anybody else knows any different, please let me know. But I think that originally the movie Nightbreed, who was shot in '89, was released in 1990, and was distributed originally by Fox. Okay, Fox Studios. They distributed the movie that belonged to Morgan Creek. But then sometime in the 90s, I think there was some kind of distribution change, and the movie got carried by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And eventually they made it a part of their Warner archive. Yeah. So now you can get the Nightbreed theatrical cut from Amazon or any other place like that, but what you get is a burn-on-demand DVD-R, DVD, which means that they burn the DVD, they send it to you, and then you can watch it. It's pretty much the same thing, the same bare-bones edition that was included on the first release in DVD, which was it just has a movie and a trailer.
Yeah.
So basically that's all there is.
And I think 20th Century Fox did the VHS and the Laserdisc, but Warner Brothers did the DVD.
Oh, okay.
And the DVD was disappointing when it came out. I mean, I remember a lot of fans saying, "Oh, I'm not gonna buy that. I'm just gonna hold out for the director's cut," which, may have been part of the reason why nobody bothered to make it in HD or look for the footage until now, because nobody was buying that. And it's not exactly their fault, because it was kind of a crappy edition of the movie.
I had no idea that there was a possibility that there would be a director's cut. I mean, this came out in 1990, and at that time, there really were no director's cuts that were it wasn't like a thing at the time. Nowadays, it's more like, oh, okay, this movie's coming out. Well, we're going to have the theatrical cut, then we're going to have the extended cut, and then we're going to have the director's cut in a few years, like they do nowadays. But so they can, double dip, triple dip, quadruple dip, and it's like the Watchmen film. I mean, the Watchmen film came out, and then they did like an extended version of the Watchmen film. Then they had like the Watchmen film with Tales of the Black Freighter. Then finally they did the extended director's cut that was like 8 hours long. I don't know.
No, they did. It was just they were mostly on Laserdisc.
Right. Yeah. So at the time, they probably people who were more interested in the Laserdisc market, they probably thought, I'm going to get this later. Might come out as Laserdisc with commentary track.
Yeah, in '95, I was at a book signing for Sacrament, and Clive. I hung back so I could ask him about, because he had mentioned it in interviews that he was trying to put together the director's cut of Nightbreed, and I said, what's that going to be like? And he said it's 25 minutes longer, and it's something about it was going to have more sex in it.
I just love. From all the things that Clive said over the years about the upcoming director's cut of Nightbreed, the thing that I loved the best was when once he said, and he was getting frustrated at this point, he pretty much had given up. He said, "Well, if we never find the footage, we can reenact it with hand puppets." And I was like, that's something I actually would pay to see.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, and actually, speaking of that, so Shout Factory, in an interview, had said that now that they have this distribution deal, they're going to try to see if they can find the footage. So I don't know how much they've been following this story of people trying to find the footage, but they seem more positive about that. So they don't really know what the final version of this movie is going to look like, because it's going to depend on whether they can find that footage, which we had all pretty much given up on by this point.
Well, yes, but at the same time, like I said, I have my reservations whether or not the efforts that have been made so far to locate the footage have been legitimate efforts or not.
Well, now they have a monetary reason for doing
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have my doubts that now that finally there's someone in place who says, well, we're going to do it, and maybe Morgan Creek will be more active and say, well, okay, well, there we go. Because I think that Scream Shout Factory, even though I don't own anything by them, I think they have a reputation for being extremely thorough and doing good releases.
I was going through their website, and it's like, man, there's a bunch of Blu-rays I want to buy on here. I had no idea. Like, they have a Day of the Dead.
I know. Yeah, I was looking at that, too, the other day. So let's wait and see what happens. Yeah. Maybe... there's no big vault that some people might think. It's not like a big vault like the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, that everything is there. You got to look into this vault. I'm thinking it's more like a collection of small warehouses scattered around that may or not be inventoried. So
well, and if this movie is if 20th Century Fox has got nothing to do with this Cabal cut, are they going to really open their warehouse to let somebody in to try to find it?
Is it even like a Fox warehouse, or is it a Morgan Creek warehouse? I don't even know.
It was a Fox warehouse where they found that stuff in Ohio.
Oh, the one in Ohio was a Fox warehouse? Yeah. Okay, then. I guess because Fox were the ones who asked Clive to cut back on some things for the movie, right? I think Fox had demanded some cuts, and that's when the original director of the editor gave up, and then they called in another editor to re-edit the film, I think. So let's wait and see what happens. Like I said, now there is a company with money behind it, so maybe that will make them change the tune of the song. Let's hope so. So anyway, 2014, it's coming. It's Region 1. It's probably going to be a DVD, maybe with Blu-ray. Yeah. And they will do their best to give you a good product. As for you people out there from Europe, before you start saying, hey, but, this is a kick in the teeth for us. Well, Russell has said that, he will do whatever he can, and he will do his best. He's been talking to other companies to see if there's also another company interested in doing a European release, which, like I keep saying in Occupy Midian, I am pretty sure that there are as many, if not more, fans of Nightbreed out there outside the U.S., that also want to buy this movie. So it would be, kind of silly not to put out in a perfect world, it would be a region-free release. But as Scream and Shout Factory seem to region-lock their DVDs and Blu-rays, then I guess the best thing is to maybe get another smaller company to release like a European DVD.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and keep in mind that everybody needs to keep in mind that this was an announcement at San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, why are they going to talk about the European release at a San Diego Comic-Con? And especially if they're still trying to work out the details. Right.
And who knows, maybe this will open the door for, maybe they'll sound the waters. Maybe they'll see, okay, let's see how this release does in the market. And if it's it's sold out. Oh, great. Okay, well, maybe that means that Morgan Creek should talk to Warner and have them transfer the original negative to HD and put out a Blu-ray of the Nightbreed.
So do Shout Factory and Scream Factory Blu-rays and DVDs appear on store shelves, or are they only mail order?
I'm not sure.
I don't know either.
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, this is the first I'd really heard of them, but I mean, they seem to have really positive, they highly regarded, I guess you'd say.
I think they might show up at least in Amazon and places like that. So
my thinking is, Occupy Midian's next job is we're going to be pushing the pre-orders.
Oh yes,
yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I was looking at the petition the other day, and I was like I said, I mentioned this in the group. I downloaded the PDF document with all the signatures in there, which was something like 13,556. Yeah. And it turned out to be a PDF with 774 pages. It's a good thing that we can also export them to CSV Excel files. That makes it much more easy to use.
We printed the first 500 signatures or 5,000 signatures.
5,000,
yeah, which was about 360 some pages. And I printed it all out and we sent it over to Clive Barker, which was kind of a fun thing, but.
Yeah.
Man, I kept jamming the copy machine trying to...
So the thing is, now we have, at least 13,000 email accounts and email addresses.
Yeah.
I mean, in the petition. And I think, honestly, this is not spam, and I'm not advocating spam, but definitely we can use those email addresses to let people know about the release. So
plus the Occupy Midian group, the Occupy Midian page, the official Occupy Midian website.
So we will be pushing for that. I'm sure it will be a success. I mean, honestly, how many DVDs can they come up with? I don't even know what their run is for those DVDs and Blu-rays, but it can't be more than 10,000 copies or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
That's interesting because we're only talking about the U.S. release.
Yeah.
So we'll be pushing pre-orders for all the other ones, too. I mean, just like I create events for things that I'm never going to go to because they're in Germany or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to buy more than one copy because I'm going to get at least 2 copies for myself and at least 1 copy for my brother who's going to be in my country of Portugal. Mm-hmm. And so at least 3 copies, I'm going to get those. So... Get a copy for each member of your family. Give a copy to your dog. Give a copy to your pet budgie.
One for each hand.
And
one for each eye.
Exactly.
So you can watch it, or you can get 2 so you can watch it twice.
Yes, and you can make drinking games with your friends. Every time Peliquin shows up, 2 drinks. So, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to 2014.
Every time Boone complains about something.
Yeah, every time Boone screams or it's going to be fun and it's going to be great. Don't forget there was also Midian Unmade, the anthology waiting for submissions. Mm-hmm. And, if you want to do a sign with saying that you support the Cabal Cut, as usual, post the pictures on the Occupy Midian group and, It was a very, very exciting week for us. So
we still don't know what extras are going to get in there, but we'll try to push to see if we can get some of our stuff from Occupy Midian into there. I mean,
yeah,
it's not really our decision, but we were a big part of making this happen, so I think it's worth a shot.
Of course, we can't lose anything, so it's going to be good. We know for a fact that extras that are being prepared for that or have been proposed by Russell will be, of course, commentary track by Clive Barker, Mark Miller, Russell Charrington. Yeah. There will be documentary about that, so there's going to be a lot of stuff. Russell has been saying this, and he said it again last week. Extras on the upcoming release, as far as he's concerned, it's going to include everything that was ever cut out of the Cabal cut. And, someone asked, what about deleted scenes? Will it have, deleted scenes? And Russell laconically replied, everything. So,
yeah.
And he said that before. He said that whatever little snippets we cut off the Cabal cut for pacing or something, we're all going to put it in there as extras. So don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm so looking forward to this.
All right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so our main topic is Weaveworld.
Yes.
Yeah, so Weaveworld was 1988, I think.
Weaveworld. It was 1987 by Clive Barker.
Okay, so same time as Hellraiser.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and so the Hellbound Heart was 86, then Hellraiser the movie in 87, and Weaveworld. Yeah, wow, it's busy time.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, and also the Books of Blood had come out in 85 or something. I'm not really sure. So
and Weaveworld is a little bit of a departure from what people had expected from Clive Barker, because it was his first first novel that wasn't a horror.
Oh, yeah. I was just looking at some interviews on YouTube, and I remember people coming up in interviews, hosts were asking Clive Barker, so tell me what this book is about. You call this the fantastique? And he was explaining what the fantastique is as a genre and as his own personal conception of what the fantastique genre would be. And people were expecting him to make more gory stuff, and he was like, no, I'm trying to, do something a little more, uplifting. So
and he's constantly fighting the press's need to sort of pigeonhole him to understand, to be able to understand all of his work without actually having to read it. So it's it's hard to pigeonhole this book, because this book it's not horror, and it's not exactly fantasy. It's more of a PG fantasy book. There are some horrific things that happen in it. Yeah, I think that there are some rated R moments.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Yeah. But overall, it's definitely more fantasy. And there was one interview, it wasn't an interview. It was an introduction to Weaveworld. I think the 1996 introduction, which they reprinted in the 25th anniversary edition, where he said that. In the past, when someone had told him, there was a time in the 90s when people would tell him that Weaveworld was their favorite book, he would kind of get upset because he felt like Weaveworld was too much of an escapist novel, and he was sort of condemning escapist fiction.
Really?
Which is, and then he's sort of turned around about that, and he doesn't feel that way anymore. But it's a strange sort of way for him to feel, because in a way, I think a lot of his fiction is escapist.
I think that the motifs that he used in Weaveworld have echoed through some of his other works. I mean,
for sure.
I before I read Magica, I'll be honest, this was my favorite Clive Barker book. Yeah, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, and I'm actually pretty proud. And I still, to this day, I'm not even sure if you ask me. If you ask me to my face immediately, which is your favorite Clive Barker book? I'll probably say out Weaveworld sometimes, and others I'll just say Magica, because I like this book so much. Yeah, it's such an amazing piece of literature.
And I haven't read it in a long time, probably
it's beautiful.
20 years.
It's beautiful. Yeah, that was excellent because I was rereading the book, rereading the first chapter like a week ago or something.
Yeah.
I was reminded again of the whole, okay, this is a Clive Barker book. And, just reading the first paragraph, it immediately takes hold of you and doesn't want to let go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your reading copy for this podcast was the 25th anniversary edition.
Yes. Yeah. That's because
my reading copy was the Poseidon Press first edition, first printing hardcover.
Oh, okay. Yep, I have that one too.
Right.
Yeah. I love the little flourishes that they do on the lettering in that edition. That's really cool.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Tolkien books or something.
Yeah, pretty neat. And it's like they kind of grasped that this was a fantasy novel and not a horror, which is cool, because everybody else was referring back to that Stephen King quote that get put on the cover of his paperbacks and stuff. I've seen the future of horror, and his name is Clive Barker, and Clive Barker's kind of like, well, can I just write whatever I want?
They're still using that for recent editions of Clive Barker's books. It's amazing.
Everybody knows who Stephen King is.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Weaveworld book is divided into 3 books, and I'm surprised to this day that they haven't decided to break it up and sell 3 volumes instead of 1.
Yeah.
Because,
like they did with Imagica.
Yeah. Which I think is an extremely artificial split in Imagica to split it in half. It's not meant to be a splittable book, for God's sake, but that's just one of my hang-ups.
No, and I never bought that. Well, for one thing, I don't collect paperbacks because they're too easy to crease the spines, and that drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So I owned all the paperbacks up to the time when Imagica came out. And then when that paperback came out in 2 parts, and I saw there was an Imagica Part 2, and it tricked me into thinking that there was some kind of a sequel. And I looked at it, and I'm like, "What? No, this is still Imagica." And then I was like, "That's it. I'm not buying paperbacks anymore." And I got rid of all the ones that I had.
Oh, I had one special overseas edition paperback that was like a 1,600-page book. So everything was in there.
The big one with the white cover with the 2 faces in the middle.
No, I used to have that one too, which was a hardcover, but I have the one which is like a big swirling sphere full of like golden things.
Oh, I know what you're
being
talking
like sucked into it.
Yeah, there was a paperback that looked exactly like the hardcover too, except it was it was so fat that it was like a cube.
Yeah, you could kill someone with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Weaveworld is split into 3 books. It's book 1 is In the Kingdom of the Cuckoo. Mm-hmm. Book 2 is The Fugue, and book 3 is Out of the Empty Quarter.
Yeah.
So it's I might use some page numbers in my review. So like I said, I'm using the Poseidon Press hardcover.
Maybe let me go grab mine then, so that I know what you're referencing.
Okay, and while you do that, I'll just go on record as saying that it's a really beautiful piece of literature. I just love it so much. I mean, ever since when I got this book. The first time I got this book, I was waiting for it for like weeks because I had to order it from this import store in Portugal. And I was hoping for that call when they finally told me, "Oh, the book is here, you can pick it up." I was like, zoom, just went there. And I was reading it in the train on the way home like I did so many times. And it was just amazing. I read this book in like a week.
It's hard to put down.
Yeah, it is.
If I were still in high school, like I was when I read this the first time, I would have been reading it. I would have read this a lot faster than what I did this last time. But
I know
life gets in the way.
Yeah, you got a baby, you got to work.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Weaveworld, it's a book with so many dozens and dozens of characters, but I guess I love the way it begins and the way it ends.
But it doesn't begin.
I know. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, nothing ever begins. There's no first word or was it first word or moment from which this or any other? I'm trying to remember. I used to have that memorized. There's no first moment. Yeah.
No single word or place from which this or any other story springs. And then it also ends with "For nothing ever begins," and this story, having no beginning, will have no end. So
you just spoiled the whole book now.
Okay, do you want to cut that?
Yeah, let's shut it up. No, shut it down. We're gonna quit the pot. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's not really a spoiler. It's just there's really good use of language in Weaveworld. It was really careful. It feels like it's really carefully laid out. I
know. I used to say that Clive Barker's prose almost sounded like poetry. Mm-hmm. There was a musicality to the English that he used, and I had to read this with a dictionary next to me because I was still learning English at the time, and it was a second language to me. So this book was a way of learning a lot of different words.
Yeah. I had always wondered too, because his language is a little bit different from American English, and I had always wondered if part of that was just him, being from England, or part of it was just, his command of language.
I think that this book is a love letter to his hometown of Liverpool as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Because it starts off in Liverpool, and then it just, he describes scenes that I'm guessing were very familiar to him. Yeah. Like when he describes the cities and the places, the Mersey, and, all those places.
And there's a really, really detailed account of, and I think this is in the beginning of book 3 or the end of book 2, I can't remember, but of the... Of Cal's drive through the snowstorm to try to get to Raymond's Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it describes which streets are closed and which ones are open and which ones are backed up and which ones have fatal accidents, and it's almost like an almanac.
Yeah. I was supposed to do this, but I didn't really do it. I mean, I had in my notes, check if there's actually a Rue Street. I think this might be fictional, the Rue Street place.
Because Rue means street, right? In French?
I know, because, Rue means street, so it's street. It's kind of like...
I could still see that happening. I mean,
right.
It's always a possibility. There's streets that have stupid names.
If anybody out there from Liverpool or England knows this, please let us know if there is a Rue Street.
Yeah, it's like in America, every town has a main street.
Yeah, and an Elm Street.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, I don't think there is, because I just checked like Google Maps and I don't seem to find it. So
okay.
All right, so this whole thing starts with an escaping bird.
Yeah, number 33.
Number 33. Yeah. And okay, so there's our main character is Cal Mooney. He is just a regular guy, regular 26-year-old guy, and his mother died like a few months ago, and his dad is like really depressed, and he's going in to check the pigeons because his and his dad used to breed racing pigeons.
Yeah.
And one day he goes in and he hears that the pigeons are restless, so he goes into the the pigeon. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the place.
It's a coop.
A pigeon coop, right?
Yeah.
So the pigeon coop, and all the pigeons are hysterical. They're just flapping away. They're hurting themselves. There's feathers everywhere, and something is like making them restless. And he tries to get like number 33 out of his cage before he hurts himself, because he was like a really prized pigeon. And all of a sudden, the pigeon escapes, flies out the door before he can catch it, and he gives chase to the pigeon.
Yeah, I used to raise pigeons, or my parents did when I was a kid. So I thought this was really cool when I read this part of the book, and I think Clive had done quite a bit of research, or it feels that way, because it feels a lot like what it's like to have pigeons.
Right. I mean, my brother used to have like pigeons in the attic when we lived in a house as I was growing up. I grew in a house until the age of 10. That's when I moved to an apartment with my parents. So we used to have an attic, and in the attic, my brother kept pigeons. One time, he let all the pigeons go to see which ones came back, and I guess 2 came back.
My father did the exact same thing. He opened the door and let them all out, and only about half of them came back.
Right. So, but I've lived when I was in college. When I was in college in the university, I did live close to this guy who actually had a chicken coop, and every day I was coming out of the classes, and I would see the guy there was always a little cloud of pigeons running around the coop in circles, and he had like a whistle, and he blew the whistle, and the pigeons would change direction and all that. So I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I'm guessing that those were real, racing trained pigeons. So yeah. The funny thing about this story and the way it begins is that he chases the pigeon, which kind of leads him to an adventure. Okay.
Yeah.
But there really was not much of a reason to chase the pigeon, was there? I mean, in fact, we find out later that he misses the pigeon, but the pigeon comes back to the pigeon coop, which is like what you'd expect from a trained racing pigeon, because they have an excellent sense of orientation. But it's kind of like we overlook that because it's like such a beautiful way to start an adventure. It's like chasing a bird.
Yeah, I think you would feel that way, though. I mean, if it was a particularly prized pigeon, you don't know for a fact that, like, a hawk's not going to get it, or,
right.
I don't know. You would feel responsible, I think.
Yeah, and this is where it starts with the love letter to Liverpool, because he says he starts running around, and then he starts looking at the city north toward Woolton Hill, and off east and southeast over Allerton toward Hunts Cross. Yeah. Row upon row of council house roofs presented themselves, rapidly giving way to the industrial wastelands of Speke. I mean, this is something Clive knows as the palm of his hand. Yeah. So, and then, of course, he chases the bird. And then he finds Rue Street, and he finds this house where the pigeon sits on a windowsill. And there are a couple of moving men there moving stuff out of this house.
Yeah. And there's a swirl of birds.
Exactly.
Overhead, and that's what made all the birds go crazy in the pigeon coop, and basically number 33 got tired, so he went and landed on the roof because he was tired of flying around in circles above whatever it was that was the disturbance. Yeah,
because something is like summoning the birds to do kind of a bird maelstrom, if you will, over this particular location. And one of the moving men says, those birds up there, they're getting their brains cooked by the sun.
Yeah.
So he comes into this house. The house is being emptied out by moving men. And he shows up and he says, hey, can I get into the garden? I need to get my prized pigeon. He's right up there. And they're like, okay, we're just moving stuff out. And, we can give you a hand catching that bird. So he climbs up the wall or gets out of a window, and he's trying to get to the bird. The bird is like pacing and is like moving away from him, and he's like, come here. And all of a sudden, one of the guys has like this carpet that he took out of the house, and they unroll it in the garden, in the back garden.
And they're sort of eyeballing it and talking amongst themselves about, I bet we could, I bet if we give this to so-and-so, that we can sell this and, make some money. So they're actually stealing from the bank that was hiring them to move stuff out to auction off as they repossess the house. Well, was it the bank, or was it like a utility company? I can't remember. Somebody was doing collections anyway.
Well, the house belonged to Mimi Lashensky,
right.
And what one of the neighbors says to Susanna, who was the granddaughter of Mimi Lashensky, is that they were like vultures. Utility companies, bank, all started, as soon as she was out of the house, because she went to the hospital, she had a stroke. Yeah. As soon as she was out of the house, that all these companies went in and started like carrying stuff out to sell, and because she had several outstanding debts. But so they open up the carpet, and he climbs the wall. He's trying to catch the pigeon. And then all of a sudden, he finds himself losing balance, and he turns around and he starts falling. But the thing that he sees while he's falling is that the carpet, all of a sudden, he looks beyond the carpet into what is hidden within. And what's hidden within is nothing short than Wonderland to him. Because he sees this landscape, and which is exactly what it's meant to be. The carpet is meant to be the fugue. The fugue is a hidden Wonderland, actually.
Weaved into the carpet.
Weaved into the carpet. And
have you read the treatment of the children's story of Weaveworld?
No, I haven't.
That's in the 25th anniversary edition, so I just finished reading that, and it's so cool, and it's really, really similar. A lot of the events are similar, but instead of Cal, it's a little boy named Nat.
Okay.
And then he meets a girl named Lucy who listens to him and sort of joins in on the adventure. And there's a guardian of the carpet named Maxwell.
Okay.
And Maxwell is from the Fugue. And Maxwell, he got so tired of watching the carpet that he kind of gave up on that life, and he got married and had a kid. They had a kid together. And his wife one day sold the carpet while he wasn't around.
Oh.
So that started the whole chain of events, and Shadwell is in it, and he's the leader of these bad guys, and Shadwell has a briefcase that has a creature called the Basilisk.
Okay.
Can turn everything to ash. So there's a lot of parallels, but what made me think of this is the reason that when Nat fell off of the wall and he could see the world in the carpet.
Yes.
The reason that happened is because Nat was like an imaginative kid that, told stories all the time and wasn't quite grounded in the real world. So, and I think that you could say the same thing about Cal, who sort of was a daydreamer, who he had a sort of a boring, normal life, but there was, Mad Mooney was sort of trapped inside of him, this not literally, not like the spirit of his grandfather, but the that was in his blood, I guess you could say.
Yeah, they do hint at that during the book, that his grandfather, his father's father, was a poet, and he was kind of like, well, even the name Mooney. I mean, Mooney refers to the moon. Yeah. As in lunatics.
Exactly,
I mean, the whole thing about the moon is that we associate people who are dreamy and who live on the moon. We actually have an idiomatic expression in Portugal, which is "you're always living on the moon," because someone's a daydreamer, and so
that makes sense.
Mooney and his grandfather was a poet and an eccentric poet at that, and that's why they call him Mad Mooney.
Yeah.
And he does identify himself with his own grandfather a lot of times in the book.
A lot more than he does with his father, Brendan Mooney, who is sort of a crushed and defeated man.
Yeah, at the time that we see it, yes, he is crushed and defeated because his wife passed away, and he kind of lost his hope, I guess. He lost his reason for, loving and living, and he's pretty much just waiting to die. And, he is a poet, and he will... It does seem like when I was reading the book, it does seem like sometimes he knows some of his grandfather's poetry, and sometimes he would use it here and there when he was talking to people. Like he would use little expressions that he learned from his grandfather, I think.
Yeah.
And, this review will have major spoilers. So,
I mean, you should...
If you haven't read the book yet, you should definitely read the book and then come back to the podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rather late to say this because we already started talking a lot about the book. But
I don't think we've really spoiled anything yet.
Right, because it's such a big book. I mean, we're just in page 40, and the book is like almost 600 pages.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm going to speak openly about the book, not worry about spoilers after this because we already warned you. And so basically what we have here is Cal Mooney. Cal Mooney, the son of Brendan Mooney, the grandson of Mad Mooney. He's going to the house of Mimi Leszczynski. He finds the fugue there. It makes such a big impression on him that after he has that vision while he's falling, trying to catch number 33, he falls into the fugue carpet. And he just sees a huge landscape, and it seems like he's falling forever. He's like stopped in time, and all of a sudden he goes, "Oh, okay, I'm falling again." Boom, and he falls. And then this event traumatizes him so much, the whole vision of Wonderland, that he is at a loss for words. I mean, he doesn't know how to explain what happened to him to anybody. Not his dad, not his girlfriend, Geraldine.
Yeah, it was I think she's like, at this point, a fiance, right? Like, they were talking about getting married.
Yeah, they were talking about actually when he the next day he's so disturbed by this vision that he locks himself in his room and he's feeling kind of sick and he's feeling kind of like loopy and out of it. Mm-hmm. And Geraldine shows up at his house and says, "Hey, where were you all day? Because we were supposed to go to my sister's rehearsal wedding."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I'm not feeling good. I had a fall." And he doesn't really tell her about the fugue, but she goes like, "Well, okay." And it's obvious that this is not in the age of cell phones yet, because there's no way that someone's fiance would just show up the next day after her fiance misses her sister's wedding rehearsal.
Yeah.
They'll probably be texting, "Hey, where are you? Hey, we're waiting for you."
Yeah.
But anyway, so, he's at a loss to explain what happened to him. So what he decides to do is he decides to go back to the house where he tried to catch number 33 so he can catch a glimpse or find out what happened to the carpet and see if he can, look at the carpet again, right? But, of course, he went there kind of looking at the sky, looking at the birds, so he wasn't really paying attention to where he was going. So he has to work hard to find Rue Street again. Yeah. And when he does find it, he walks into the house, but the moving men, of course, aren't there, and neither is the fugue. One other thing that is introduced at this point is when he falls into the fugue, and the fugue reveals itself to Cal, Immaculata, who is this other main character in the book, she senses the fugue, and she gets this sense that the fugue is somewhere close. And she's like, "Oh, I can feel the fugue." And what she wants to do is she's paired up with this guy called Shadwell. Mm-hmm. And Shadwell is like the best salesman ever.
Yeah.
Because he not only is an experienced salesman, he also has the added bonus of having this jacket that has a rapture woven into its lining.
And that was made by Immaculata.
Yeah, that was made by Immaculata. He protects her, and he leads her into the world of the kingdom of the cuckoo. The cuckoos are the humans.
Right.
And the people from the fugue are the seer kind.
And they call humans the cuckoos because humans don't believe or want to see magic, so the world accommodates and makes magic so that it doesn't exist for them.
Yeah, it's weird. It's one of Capra's tenets.
Yeah.
Is that the laws of the cuckoo are the laws of the kingdom. So Capra is this wise man that had all these laws and things written down for the seer kind. The seer kind are split into actually 4 families. Right. They are the Lo, the Aya, the Babu, and the Yemi. Mm-hmm. And each one of these families has different skills, right? The Aya do magic with their singing voices. I think the Yemi are the ones who are the weavers. Mm-hmm. And then the Lo, I don't remember exactly what they did.
Yeah.
And the Babu have golden eyes.
Right.
So
right.
They're the ones who have upcoming characters will be Jericho and Nimrod. Mm-hmm. And those are pretty cool, especially Nimrod. Nimrod is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
He starts off as a baby.
Right.
But, okay, so what Immaculata wants to do is she wants to find the fugue and enslave the seer kind, sell them into slavery.
Yeah, it's her revenge because she's been kicked out of the fugue.
Yes. There was a war. There was kind of a war between her followers and the seer kind. And she's one of the cognoscenti. She's also known as the Black Madonna, Master Maleficorum, and the Lady of Sorrows. There's actually a cult that devoted to worshiping her.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, and you're going to find this funny, but she's described as an olive skin woman, a Jewess's olive skin. But I always imagine Immaculata as kind of like this black woman, I think. In my mind's eye, she was always like this black woman.
In my mind's eye, she was always sort of pale and dark hair.
Okay.
But because she was, I don't know, because she was always infatuated with death. And
right. I always envisioned her as I was reading the book, and even nowadays, I mean, even after rereading everything and seeing that, olive skin, Jewess's skin description, I still kind of like to imagine her as, I came up with this little thing. I was like, Dreamcast for a Weaveworld movie, okay? So bear with me. And I was like picking out actors that I thought would fit the characters in my mind's eye. Yeah. And so for Immaculata, I would go for Iman, the model, married to David Bowie.
I don't know her.
Yeah, well, she's really pretty, a black lady. And for Cal Mooney, I would go with Cillian Murphy, who played the Scarecrow in Batman Begins. Because he kind of has that. He kind of has that blue eyes, kind of that dreamy look. And for Mimi Leszczynski, I would go with Judi Dench. And let me see where I put that other thing. And for Susanna Parrish, I have that thing on a Post-it. I'm trying to find where I put that thing. Okay, I lost it. No, here it is. I was going for Kate Winslet as Susanna.
Oh, okay.
I know, kind of strange. And for Hobart, I was going with Charles Hayde, which I really can't. I can't really envision anybody else playing Hobart.
Oh my God! Yeah, he's Hayde. Almost the same character.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's almost the same character as the guy in Nightbreed, Igerman.
Yeah, I was actually just reading an interview where Clive had said sometimes characters surprise him, and he found that Hobart surprised him because at the end he had become sympathetic, and he wasn't expecting that to happen.
A little bit, yeah. After he's taken by the dragon,
right.
Yes. And also for Shadwell, and if you love Charles Hayde, you're going to love this. A young Tom Selleck. That's who I came up with. With a mustache and but sleek back hair and straight hair. It's what I see when I read the book. It's who I envision.
Yeah,
I envision Shadwell as this kind of tall, dark Tom Selleck with slick back hair and a mustache. I just see him that way. So yeah, I mean, that's my dream cast for a Weaveworld movie. Of course, this would be impossible because all these characters now, all these actors have different ages and they wouldn't fit. But this is who I envision as a perfect cast for this film.
I would love to see a Weaveworld miniseries because I think it's too big to be a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think that, and there was talk with Showtime about actually doing that. But I think that back then was the wrong time, and now there's so much more of a precedent for movies that sort of push the or miniseries or TV series that push the boundaries of sex and violence.
Yeah, and now you got to think Netflix and everything. I mean, that can fund their own shows.
Yeah.
So, gosh, I wish this could be turned into a miniseries. There's no way that this can be put into a 2.5-hour movie.
No, you would have to cut a lot of stuff and and it would have to take because there were some pauses where people live their lives and start to forget. Cal forgets the fugue and forgets his adventure. And that's an important part of the story and really shouldn't be cut out. But what they like to do when they adapt a novel like this to a movie is keep everything moving, and it's like it all happens within a few hour period of time.
Right.
Instead of...
I could see them trying to fit this whole story in 2 or 3 days' time or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it would totally destroy the pacing of it.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most important things about this is the forgetting. It's
the forgetting and the remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that I told you. I don't know if I told you this on the record or not, but there's some motifs in the story that pop up as in other Clive Barker's.
I made a note about one of them.
Cal Mooney, and I know that I'm jumping way ahead in the story, but when Cal Mooney kind of forgets himself, and he's trying to come back into the world, and that reminded me so much, rereading this, of Gentle, when he loses his memory coming back from the Imagica, and he's living in the street, and he's like drawing on the sidewalk with his chalks. Yeah. And that's how he works out everything in his mind. He draws all these visions from the Dominions, and he comes back into his own self. And that was kind of like the same thing that happens here with Cal Mooney near the end of the book, when he kind of falls into his own emptiness, and then he rises back into himself. And I see stuff like that, and also, I mean, there's stuff in here that could just as well overlap with Nightbreed, the Cabal book.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they talk about the seer kind and these tribes and these families. Of course, here there's just like four families, and they all pretty much stem from these four families. But they're kind of like the Nightbreed in a way, right? They're like these tribes of people hiding from the cuckoos or the naturals. Yeah. And they pretty much, instead of living underground in a city, they live inside a carpet. Well, while they sleep.
That 1996 introduction, which I had never read before because 1996 would have meant that it was probably written for a paperback. But anyway, in that introduction, he talked about the central idea that sort of spurred this whole book was, as a kid, Clive Barker had his family had visited an orchard, and that orchard was sort of a magical place, and it was probably a lot bigger in his mind than it was in real life.
Sure.
And as he got older, just trying to hold on to that memory, and he couldn't do it. And just the magic of that place fading away.
And there is an orchard scene in this book, the orchard of Lemuel Lowe, who was one of the Lowe family, and it actually is a place of art and poetry. And people go to his orchard to recite poetry, so they can eat from his orchard. And
even more than that, that orchard later on in the story gets burned to the ground. And if you go to Abarat, Christopher Carrion's father set fire to their family orchard, or that was, I don't think that's what really happened, but that's the story that he was told.
Right.
Set fire to their orchard, and that's what kind of, and the rest of his siblings died in the fire, and that's what sort of maimed Christopher Carrion.
Ah, okay, yeah. And also, I mean, now that we're on the topic of Lemuel Lowe's orchard, I mean, when I was reading the Traveling Circus of Maximilian Bacchus, Maximilian Bacchus was Lemuel Lowe in my mind, because that's the only character that would come to my mind, like a rubicund, rotund, bearded, very theatrical character. This motif kind of replicates himself in a few of Clive Barker's stories.
Well, and there's some of those pictures that he drew for Weaveworld, and I always wondered, what is that supposed to be? It turns out they were drawn for the children's version of Weaveworld. Ah. So like that guy, that kind of heavy guy with the mustache and stuff, and then later on he's being carried away by these devils. Uh-huh. So that is Maxwell, and he's the guardian of the carpet.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So was this story written after Weaveworld, or was it
before? I think it was rejected by the publishers, maybe.
Okay.
So it's not even written out as a story. It's written out as sort of a list of events, and I think it was written as a treatment so that he could he could sell the story to the publishers.
That's fascinating. So it would have been like his first book before Thief of Always, written for children.
Right, yeah. So then it was 6 years later that he actually did.
Wow.
Thief of Always.
Now I have to get the 25th anniversary version.
It's really good. Mm-hmm. And I love the illustrations. I didn't feel like there was enough of them. I kind of wanted to see more, but they're great. He especially drew whenever there was a monster or something fantastic, then he would draw that.
Yeah.
Richard Kirk, I mean.
Right, Richard Kirk. Mm-hmm. So, going back to the story, At the same time that Cal is trying to work out what he just saw and fighting the desire to go back to see the carpet at the house, which he doesn't know that it's not there anymore, but he wants to go back. And at the same time, Suzanne is being called to a hospital because her grandmother has had a stroke and she's about to die. And, the doctor says, you're the only next of kin who lives here in England, I guess.
She has a brother, or there's
a son.
Yeah, she has a son in Canada, I think.
Canada, yeah.
And Susanna is a pottery. She does pottery in London, I think, right?
Yes, she does pots and plates.
Yeah.
So she pretty much doesn't really know much about her grandmother. She was always like an estranged granddaughter, and she just has these memories of seeing her grandmother when she was a kid. Our mother took her there. And so basically, there is no real connection, and she's kind of like a little, okay, I'm going to the hospital, visit my grandmother that I haven't seen in
And she had a memory
12 years or 10 or 20 years or something.
She had a memory from when she was little of her grandmother saying, go up into the spare bedroom and look in the wardrobe, and there's a present there for you.
Yeah, and the tall boy.
Yeah, I guess it's a tall boy. It's kind of like a wardrobe, I think.
Yeah.
And she opened it up and she saw something in the mirror that scared her, and I can't remember what that is.
It's herself. It was her reflection in the mirror.
Oh. So there was.
That's what.
I thought that there was something more to it, that there was something magic that scared her.
It could be, but I think that the way that scene is written is that she goes in there and it's dark, and she's tiptoeing, and she's I don't want to be here in the dark opening this tall boy. And then she opens it up and she remembers seeing something looking afraid and desperate at her. And she runs away crying to her mother downstairs. And then Mimi says something about having a mirror in the tall boy. So we were left to wonder, was it really something, or was it herself that she saw in the mirror?
Well, and I think that over the course of the book, Susanna wonders that too. If there was something else there, or did she just see herself?
So that's one of the memories she has of her grandmother. So she goes there, and her grandmother had a stroke. She can't even talk. She's bedridden. But she's like, the doctor says, well, she's kind of been holding on. And the only name that she actually spoke, because the stroke kind of took away her speech, the only name that she clearly spoke was your name, Susanna. Yeah. And so I think that she's really happy that you're here. And he leaves her alone with Mimi Leszczynski, and she's holding her hand, sitting next to her, and all of a sudden she does something. She can't speak, but she transmits something using every ounce of strength that she has. And she conveys first the smell of lavender, I think, and then she actually puts an image in her mind's eye, which is an image of this geometric, colorful thing, which she doesn't know what it is, but of course we're going to find out later. It's the fugue. It's the carpet.
Right.
She's trying to tell her that she needs to get to the carpet. So she's really jarred about that power that she didn't know her grandmother had, the way that she kind of telepathically transmits that image into her mind with such an urgency. And she kind of has another kind of stroke, and the doctor says, oh, I'm sorry, you have to leave. She's taking a turn for the worse. So she's staying in a hotel, and then eventually she goes to visit her grandmother's house. And when she goes there, it's pretty much a little bit after Cal has reached the house as well. And when Cal reached the house a couple hours earlier or something, he goes in looking for something he can't really describe, and he finds someone there, this gentleman called Shadwell. Yeah. And he's like, hey, what are you doing here? Do you want to buy the house or something? And Cal doesn't really know. And he's like, I was just looking for something. And he well, if you're looking for something, just tell me what it is. And he starts opening his jacket. And this is where Shadwell starts exhibiting his powers, right? I mean, his salesman powers and also his magic jacket.
So, it shows whatever your deepest desire is, it will give it to you. And it's kind of a sham. I mean, it's whatever the thing is, it's just sort of a weird copy of the thing, and not like a real
Right. It's just, it might even be something that doesn't really exist, but your mind kind of makes it happen, and the jacket kind of makes it happen and gives it to you. But I don't think it lasts, right? I think whatever it gives you, it doesn't really last for that long.
Just as long as he needs your cooperation.
Right.
Something. Yeah. And in the children's story, he opens his jacket and shows Nat all of these things that he would like. Like there's a picture of him as a soccer star and a bunch of other things, and Nat kicks him in the shins and runs away. And that actually happens twice in the story, where he kicks Shadwell in the shins, and Shadwell's like, oh.
and again, I mean, if you go to the Thief of Always, and you go to Mr. Hood, the house, and Harvey Swick.
Yeah.
There's also a scene where the house is trying to give Harvey what he wants to keep him happy.
Yeah.
And he starts to shine all these things, all these books, racing cars, things, and all this stuff. And it's kind of like a parallel to Shadwell trying to seduce or entice Nat, or in this case, Cal.
Yeah.
So it's another parallel that just hit me now. The Mr. Hood's house, and when he tries to
that's a good one. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm going to just keep on giving you things until you want to stay here. Like in the movie Labyrinth.
David Bowie.
That little goblin creature, that female goblin creature, and she's like, "Oh, you like your bear, don't you?" And sort of puts Jennifer Connelly's character into a trance, and
in a ballroom, and tries to make her forget herself, like, "Oh, this is your bedroom," and it's not her bedroom, but
don't forget old bear.
Yeah, so that's cool. And so basically, he's trying to entice Cal into giving away information about what was that he saw in that house. Because when Immaculata and Shadwell get to the house, of course, the fugue is no longer there, because the moving men have gone away with it.
And I think the jacket sort of fails, doesn't it? Because what he's dreaming about is the fugue, and the jacket can't provide it. And Immaculata says he's thinking of the fugue.
Well, the jacket does show him an image of the fugue. He starts to see this breeze blowing through the jacket, and he starts to see the landscape beyond.
But it doesn't spit out the carpet or a copy of the carpet.
No.
Yeah.
But, of course, Immaculata says he saw it. He saw the fugue. And that's when she moves forward, and that's when he says, I don't know what I saw. And so basically, they want to know what he knows. They want to ask him if he knows where it went to. They want to get any piece of information out of him, but they fail.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Go ahead.
No, because he really doesn't want to tell them that, because one, he doesn't know how to say it, and two, he doesn't want to say it to them. And then they threaten him.
Yeah.
She says, "Well, I got my sister's kids here, and they're pretty gruesome. So if I call them, they will come at you and attack you if you don't tell me what I want to know."
And Immaculata is interesting because she has two sisters with her, and they're both dead. They're ghosts.
Yeah,
they're sort of corporeal ghosts. So they're like these undead creatures. And there's a rumor that she strangled them at birth, or she strangled them in the womb with their own umbilical cords.
Yes,
and they've become a part of her for the rest of her life. But it's never really confirmed that that's really how they died. It's a rumor.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I think that there is a moment when someone actually says that. I think it's like Shadwell or someone. Yeah. But her two sisters are the Magdalene, also known as Mama Puss, and we'll find out why she's called that a little further ahead.
And the Hag.
And the Hag. Yeah.
I don't know. Do they ever say the Hag's name?
I don't think so. I think it's always like the Hag. Yeah. But Magdalene is blind. She's like a blind ghost. Yeah. And they're like this, like you said, incorporeal, but at the same time they kind of like manifest a little bit in the physical world. And they have like these strands of tissue, like ectoplasmic tissue or something. One of the guys who's attacked by the Magdalene kind of describes it as kind of like phlegm. Like tentacles of phlegm, but they like move, so you know there's something behind it. So it's really gruesome. And
so for not being a horror novel, they're pretty horrific.
Yeah, especially because the hag is really this whole riddled carcass.
Yeah.
Like, she looks like an old woman all full of like holes and stuff.
Yeah.
And the Magdalene is blind, and she actually has this kind of like permanent pregnant kind of like physiology. Like, she has like large breasts, and she gives birth to these creatures,
she grabs somebody and sort of sucks them up. And
she kind of violates them and then takes their seed and creates what they call biblos.
Yeah.
Which are these weird creatures. They look like they have like the face of the father, but then it's like they don't even have a body. They just have like 4 limbs coming out of their necks, and then they have like these sacs hung underneath their bodies
so
that look like wet
all these
liver.
Vestigial organs that don't really seem to serve a purpose, and they just sort of drag along behind them on the ground.
Ow, 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 ow. I'm sorry. My cat was like sticking his claws into me.
Oh, I thought you were just imagining the organs dragging on the ground.
No. It was a tummy rub gone wrong. But, so the Immaculata threatens Cal with these creatures. She says, they're right behind the door. As soon as I call them, they'll come. Ow, ow. All right, cat. As soon as I call them, they will just jump at your eyes or something. And then she like rubs her fingers together, and they emerge from the door and they start running towards Cal.
And this is Shadwell and Immaculata are sort of playing good cop, bad cop, right? Because Shadwell's like, well, I tried to reason with you. If you don't want to talk to me, you got to talk to her and the byblos. And I think you'd much rather talk to me. And it's sort of... he doesn't play nice that often. It gets worse and worse as the story goes along.
Absolutely.
That's sort of an interesting, he's... at this point in the story, he's still this sort of slick salesman character.
Yeah. That's one of the things that he prides himself on being. So... at this moment, Susanna is walking through the door, and she hears some noise coming from the landing upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, we see like Cal running down the stairs, and he's going like, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" And Shadwell tries to trick Susanna. He says, "Stop, thief!" But she kind of like gets a good feeling about Cal, and she lets him escape. And then he was like, "Why did you do that?" And she sees Immaculata coming down the stairs, and Immaculata is like, "Get out of my way, woman." And at first she like gets out of her way, but then she steps into her way and goes like, "No." And there's like a standoff between Susanna and Immaculata where they're like checking each other out, and Shadwell is like, it's okay. Don't worry about her. She's nobody. He's trying to like calm Immaculata down. And I guess it's because he knows that if someone confronts Immaculata, things are going to get ugly really fast.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be... I think at this point he's still trying to maintain a normal human life.
Yeah.
And not have to deal with murder. And is it at this point that the menstruum goes into...
No.
Okay, that's later on.
Yes, that's later on.
Okay.
At this moment, still, they just confront. They look at each other, and then she just goes like, "Okay, well, I'm trying to remember what she said."
I think that Susanna and Cal make the perfect set of protagonists for this story, because they each represent sort of one half of a complete character. Cal has a connection to the fugue, the carpet, and Susanna doesn't know anything about the carpet, but she has a connection to her grandmother, who is the protector of the carpet.
Yes, she was a custodian.
Yeah, so together they make two pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, further ahead, they will be the key that unravels the first piece of the fugue.
Yeah.
So what happens is that Immaculata just, looks away from Susanna, and she lets Shadwell lead her away from the house, because Shadwell has another way of getting to Cal. Because when he introduced himself to Cal in the Mimi Lashinsky's house, he was like, pretending to be, "Hey, I'm Shadwell, how are you doing?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm Mooney, Calhoun Mooney." Yeah. So he has his name. And what they do is, the next step, they go to Brendan Mooney's house, Cal's dad. Yeah. And that's when Shadwell works his magic again and says, "Hi, Mr. Mooney, I met your son. Is he home?" And he goes like, "No." It's like, well, I want to tell you that, I represent this, I want to give you a prize, and, and he opens up his jacket, and he goes like, hey, your prize is right here. Do you see it? And he starts looking, and what did Brendan want the most? Apart from his wife, of course, he knows he can't get his wife back, but his wife, a few months after they had married, she had said something one night like, well, if I die first before you die, I will find a way to come back and tell you what Evan is like.
Yeah.
So, and then he remembers that interaction with his wife, and what he takes out of Shadwell's jacket is a letter.
Yeah.
A letter from his wife, from the dead.
A reassuring letter, that everything's great.
Which and of course,
is a really, really just a really shitty thing to do. I mean, but Shadwell has no control over what comes out of the jacket.
No, of course not.
But Cal doesn't see it that way. I mean, right? This is really devastating for Brendan when the magic fades away.
Yeah, but until it does, he's really happy as a loon. He's like, "Oh, it's true."
And
Shadwell is an angel.
Yeah, he believes that Shadwell's is an angel, and he even says that in front of Shadwell, and Shadwell doesn't do anything to deny it.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, yeah, sure, right."
Yeah, and I have another prize just like this for your son. So It's really important that I talk to him.
He's like, "Well, I have something for you. It comes with a price. The price is that you're going to have to help me when I need your help." And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And, it describes the letter and how he's so happy about the letter. He's rubbing the letter while he's talking to Shadwell, and the letter is warm and it smells like flowers. And he's like, oh, it must have come from heaven. So it's really devastating when he finally realizes that was just a sham.
Yeah.
So what this will amount to is that when Cal finally makes it back home, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my way here. I was going to say that he meets Geraldine and then he goes to the wedding of her sister.
Yeah, and that's when he gets attacked by Mama Puss. Right, he escapes.
Okay, well, he escapes and then he goes back home, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's like the next day or something.
Yeah, that Shadwell comes back and visits. But it's because Tom and Susanna together have figured out where the carpet's going. Yeah, and actually, he tells Shadwell that he's at a wedding, but also later on he also tells Shadwell that they're going to this moving company building.
Yeah, to the warehouse, Gilchrist.
The warehouse, yeah.
That's a little further ahead in the story.
Yeah.
What happens is after they leave Mimi Leszczynski's house, and So Cal escapes. Susanna has a standoff with Immaculata. Immaculata and Shadwell depart from Mimi Leszczynski's house. And the next thing they do is they go to find Mimi Leszczynski at the hospital. Mm-hmm. And that is something that Immaculata did not want to do because she was afraid that the custodian of the carpet might have some, power left in her or some kind of last-minute emergency rapture that she could use to protect her secrets from Immaculata. But what really happens is that it's been 80 years, and Mimi Leszczynski had a stroke, and she's dying in a hospital bed, and she is a broken woman, and she has forgotten most of the things that were taught to her by the four families of the Fugue. Mm-hmm. But she still had one single spell in her hand. This glyph that was drawn with henna on the palm of her hand, and it had been drawn there so many times over the years that it had permanently stained her hand. So when the Immaculata goes there and she tries to coax the information out of Mimi Leszczynski, and she finds out that she can't speak, she's like, well, it's okay. I have other ways of, getting the information from your mind. So she releases the menstruum. She manifests the menstruum. The menstruum is this power that she wields, which is meant to be this extremely powerful thing that only women would have, and it would provide the woman wielding it with extreme. It cost a lot to have that power. A lot of people would get crazy. A lot of people would commit suicide because it brought you these terrible visions and these terrible feelings, and according to how you handled it. So what she does is she unleashes these tentacles of the menstruum, which is kind of like a stream, or I always envisioned it as kind of like these silver tentacles coming out from the body.
Kind of like the T-1000 in Terminator 2.
Right,
like
or
this liquid that can become sort of solid and...
Yeah, and it's described in a few instances as this torrent of small little silver fish, which is kind of reminds me also of that lake in Imagica where Gentle falls into, and he gets invaded by this stream of little fish that goes into his esophagus. You remember that?
Yeah, okay. Right.
But so when she's getting ready to extract the information with the menstruum, Mimi uses that spell and kind of creates a protective net around her bed. But then it is shown that that power wasn't enough because she just destroys that little protective net, and she takes a hold of Mimi and tries to get the information where the carpet is. What did you do with it? Who did you give it to? And then it mentions something which is really tragic, which is finally Mimi Leszczynski was using her secret weapon. She was dying. Yeah. She was dying on Immaculata. She was willing herself to die so that she wouldn't be able to get the information from her.
And before, when she threw up that protective net, Immaculata was relieved. She's like, "Oh, I was afraid that you had some terrible powers, but this is all you've got. Oh, that's such a relief."
Yeah, and we also find later in the story that there were supposed to be more custodians of the carpet, but somehow they just disappeared.
Yeah.
Maybe they died, maybe they got old and died, because...
Or maybe they were assassinated by...
Or, maybe they were assassinated by Immaculata. So, anyway, and then after that, they go to visit, because she couldn't get information from Mimi, except for the fact that... Yeah.
So they go back to Brendan Mooney.
The nurse comes into the bedroom and she kind of sees something really strange. And it's one of those things like they see the fantastic and it's like their mind refuses to admit that they saw it.
Yeah.
So when the nurse opens the bedroom, she sees like this manifestation of a dead man standing there, which is one of the visions that Immaculata tries to coax Mimi into releasing her mind, which was she tried to evoke a ghost of her lost lover, Romo, which I assume would be Seerkind.
Yeah.
And then she sees these dead women as well, which are Immaculata's sisters. And then she finds Mimi Leszczynski in the middle of her dying throes. And Immaculata is just standing there. And Immaculata told the nurse that she was her daughter, Mimi Leszczynski's daughter, so that's why she let her visit Mimi. And at the same time that she sees that horrible portrait, the women disappear, the dead body disappears, and she's like, I'm not even sure I actually saw that. So she just thinks that she saw Mimi passing away with her daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they say, okay, then they go back to Brendan Mooney.
Yeah, they go to Brendan Mooney, which by this point, after he receives the letter from his wife, from Shadwell's jacket, he says to Shadwell, "Oh, my son is at a wedding." And, of course, this wedding is the wedding of Geraldine's sister. And so they go and crash that wedding. Shadwell and Immaculata go and crash that wedding because the wedding has taken place. Everybody's getting drunk. Everybody's dancing and partying and moving into the bushes in couples to make out in the garden. And all of a sudden, Mooney sees Shadwell talking to the bouncers at the party, and he realizes, oh no, they've tracked me here. So there's a little side story at this point where there's this other guest at the party who's like, hey, Cal, my man, can you hook me up with one of the bridesmaids?
Introduce me to one of them, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, I guess you're out of luck because she just went over there with someone else. And that guy goes over and sees, oh, I can't believe that she's with someone else. And he goes over and he thinks he walked into like a spider web or something, but it turns out that he just walks into the phlegmy tentacles of Mama Puss.
Yeah.
So he gets violated in the bushes by Mama Puss. And he just starts screaming and everybody's like, what's your problem? But anyway, he sees Shadwell. He tries to move out of the party. He's trying to get away, and he's like, "Oh, I got to tell someone that there's this person here who's not supposed to be at the wedding." But instead, he finds Geraldine, and Geraldine is like, "Hey, where have you been? I've been looking for you. Hey, come here. I need to show you something." And as she takes him out of the party, and she's just laughing and smiling, and is like, "What's going on?" And then all of a sudden, her face kind of melts off, and it turns out it was Immaculata.
Yeah.
It was Immaculata, and Shadwell shows up with a gun and says, "You got to come with us." And so they take him in a Mercedes out of the party because they want to know. He's their only element to finding out any information about the carpet, because at this moment he was the only one who saw the fugue, apart from the moving men. So
they drive him to some desolate place.
They drive him to a trash heap, like the garbage. What do you call it? Dump. Yeah, the garbage dump.
Yeah.
So
and so Shadwell's being the good cop again. Hey, you don't want to talk to the Byblows. You want to talk to me.
Right, but the Byblows are gathered all around Mama Puss.
Yeah, and
she's giving birth.
And I know you know where the carpet is. So why don't you just tell me instead of having to tell them? And he's like, "Okay, I give up. I tried." And Cal, I think at this point, what happens?
What happens is that Mama Puss is giving birth to the Byblows that result from her violation of that wedding guest.
Yeah. And
he actually sees the Byblows being born, and he's like, "Yeah, you're going to have to tell us, or these babies here are going to jump on you." And one of the Byblows that comes out of Mama Puss has the same features as the guest at the wedding.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. It actually speaks his name, Carl.
Yeah.
And jumps up, and they grab him, and they start squeezing him. And
at some point he starts screaming nonsense, and I can't remember what it was that he said.
He starts screaming the timetable for the trains.
Oh, that's right, yeah. And they eventually give up on him and just leave him there.
Well, because they're saying, tell us what you saw, tell us where's the carpet, and he's like, "I don't know." And then the Byblow is starting to get close to his mouth and is like really squeezing him hard. And he's like, "Okay, I'll tell you everything. And he just starts reciting the timetable of the trains, like to Inverness, Aberdeen. It's like something that I guess he kind of like escapes into that because it's what's happening to him is so terrible that he just escapes into that piece of banal trivia that he has memorized over the years. And they probably think that he just got broken and they just leave him behind.
Yeah.
But not before the Magdalene, squats down on Cal and, rapes him. Yeah. And then they leave. And they just leave him behind all broken up, all like dirty and scratched and, And then what happens is he goes back to the house of Mimi Leszczynski, right?
Yeah.
And he finds Susanna there because by this time Susanna was called to the hospital. They told her your grandmother is dead. And she went there and, she gets informed that, oh, her daughter was here. Her daughter was my mother and she's been dead for like a few years.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, well, I can tell you she died of natural causes."
Yeah.
And then she goes to spend the night at Mimi Leszczynski's house because ever since she started this whole thing, she keeps thinking about that gift that her grandmother wanted to give her all those years ago.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be in the tall boy. And she can't shake that thought out of her mind. And the fact that she was with her grandmother and she gave her that vision has made her realize that there is something special about that house, something special about her grandmother, and that she probably needs to go there and revisit that place because there's something there. And she does find the tall boy.
Yeah.
It has not been taken out.
They took it like down the stairs and got tired of it or something, and it was in a pile of furniture.
Mm-hmm. And so she opens it up, and what do you know? There's all of Mimi Leszczynski's like dresses there and ball gowns and all that. And at the bottom of it, there's a package wrapped in paper and twine, and she opens it, and it's her gift. And it says something inside like, "For Susanna, love, ML." And she opens it up, and it's this German book. It's this German book
of fairy tales.
Of fairy tales. And here's that line that keeps getting like quoted and appears in a bunch of like images that people make on Twitter and on Tumblr and all that, which is it's written in German, so it's das was man sich vorstellt, braucht man nie überlegen, which means that which is imagined need never be lost.
Or that which can be imagined, right?
Well, in the book it says that which is imagined need never be lost. It's on page 95 of the Poseidon Press edition. So, that's when she starts reading it. She starts reading all these stories about knights, dragons, fantastic places. It's full of illustrations. It's full of like little, some of the stories she recognizes from movies or fairy tales that she heard when he was small. And she eventually falls asleep reading that book. Mm-hmm. It's a really moody scene because Mimi Leszczynski had stopped paying utility bills a long time ago, so she didn't have any gas or electricity in the house, so she had to light up a bunch of candles. And when she wakes up, she hears some noise. Someone's trying to get into the house. She goes downstairs, and what do you know? It's Cal. He's all dirtied up. He's all banged up and scratched, but, he's walking into the house. He doesn't really know what he's doing at this point. And she calls out to him, and he starts running away. And she's like, "Oh, it's me. It's Susanna." And he kind of stops and goes like, "Oh, okay, it's you." And she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I don't even know."
Yeah.
But then she lets him like clean up, and she asks him, "So what was all that about? With that couple that was here?" And he's like, he decides to tell her the story. Mm-hmm. And she also tells him some things about Mimi Leszczynski, and they start piecing things together, as fantastic as it may be, and that's how the scene where they start getting some kind of companionship, some kind of friendship here.
And they go back to Cal's house, right? And they put together a plan.
Yeah,
and
they go back.
And they figure out that it's where the carpet is, and Brendan overhears that.
Yeah, because they think that. I'm sorry, I kind of missed a little thing here. At this point, they don't know that Mimi is dead yet, and it's just that when they're talking, it was my mistake. So Susanna just went to her grandmother's house because she wanted to find the gift in the tall boy. Yeah. At this moment, she still didn't know that her grandmother had died, and when she's talking to Cal, all of a sudden Cal gets up and says, "Oh my gosh, your grandmother's in the hospital?" And she's like, "Oh no," because that's the next place they're going to look. So they go to the hospital, and when they come out of the hospital, it's when they realize, okay, so your grandmother was dead. Yeah. And that's when they go and have breakfast together, and then they go to Cal's house.
Yeah, that's right.
So Brendan is introduced to Susanna, and he's ecstatic. And then, Cal is like, "Hey, Dad, I've never seen you this upbeat before." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I cleaned out the pigeons and I fed the pigeons."
Yeah. And
Cal is talking to Susanna, and they realize, "Oh wait, I remember the moving men mentioned someone about maybe selling the carpet to this warehouse of this guy called Gilchrist." And she's like, "Oh, let's look him up in the phone book." And they look him up, and they call the warehouse at Gilchrist. And someone answers the phone. He's like, "Okay, can I talk to Mr. Gilchrist?" And it says, "Oh, he's been dead for has been dead for 8 years." And it's like, "Oh, okay, so who's in charge?" "Oh, it's so-and-so." And she says, can I talk to him?" And it's like, "Oh, he's actually not here. He's in the Isle of Wight." And he's like, "What's this about?" And he's like, "Oh, it's about a carpet that was sold and was not meant to be there." And it's like, "Well, you'll have to call him when he comes back." And they hung up. And of course, this will eventually be the information that Brendan overhears. Mm. And Cal says, "You know what? That place is closed now, and the owner is in the Isle of Wight. I can't wait. Let's just go there and let's just break in. Yeah, let's just go get it." So they go there and they decide to break into Gilchrist, which is actually located in an old abandoned movie theater. A Baroque Rococo with a dome movie theater, which again is another amazing, set piece. It's another amazing location, and in my imagination, I mean, you just imagine these things, and it makes for amazing sets for the story. So they break in. They start looking for the carpet. Of course, it's going to be complicated because there's so many piles of furniture, piles of carpets. Some things have price tags, other things don't have price tags. So they're like, well, let's split up. You look that way, I'll look this way. And then all of a sudden, Cal hears some footsteps, and it turns out to be Shadwell. And also Susanna sees like her grandmother, she walks... Yeah. She turns a corner, and her grandmother is standing right there. And, of course, it's not Mimi Lashensky. It's
Cal
Immaculata.
had already found the carpet at this point.
Yes, and Cal had found the carpet in a pile of carpets, and he pulled it out and was like, oh, I think it's the carpet. And Shadwell's like, I think that's my property there.
Yeah.
And
it's like, oh, crap.
Right.
Can't they ever catch a break?
Shadwell and Immaculata are there because Brendan called Shadwell to say, hey, you told me to call you, Angel, so here I'm calling you to tell you my son was here with a friend, and they said they were going to this warehouse called Gilchrist's.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, thank you. I'm going to give Cal his prize now. And he's like, oh, cool. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And, of course, his prize is like a bullet. But so there's a scuffle, and Shadwell escapes with the carpet. But not all of the carpet. There's a little piece of the carpet that gets ripped out. Mm-hmm. And Shadwell leaves with Immaculata. They got the carpet. They're all happy. They're saying, well, now I can have revenge on the seer kind. And when Susanna confronts Immaculata after she discovers that she's not Mimi Lashensky, her face kind of melts out, just like it did at the wedding when she's like tricking Cal into thinking that she was Geraldine.
Yeah.
And here there's a confrontation between Susanna and Immaculata uses the menstruum. But what happens is that it turns out that she uses the menstruum on Susanna, but Susanna kind of like stops the menstruum and yanks at it and kind of hurts Immaculata. And then it also awakens the menstruum power in her.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, okay, well, now your grief has just begun because now you got that power too.
Yeah.
And actually, after that confrontation is over, she runs over to find Cal in the warehouse, and he's like all beat up because Shadwell must have overpowered him or hit him in the head or something. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of like looking a little dead. And she's like, oh, my God, I got to help him. And she feels the menstruum come out, and it kind of heals Cal.
Yeah.
She kind of lets the power flows out of her body and heal Cal back into consciousness. But it's the first time she's using it, so she can't control it. So it starts sucking away her own life force to give it to Cal.
Yeah.
So she kind of passes out. When she wakes up, Cal is there, and he's like, oh, hey, you kind of faded on me there. And it's like, what happened? It's like, oh, Shadwell escaped with the carpet. Oh, but there's still a little piece here. So they go like, oh, wow, okay. So they escape. They go back to Cal's house. And at this point, they have no reason to believe that his house is compromised because they don't know that Brendan has been calling Shadwell.
Yeah.
And they spend the night there. And while they sleep, in their dreams, they unravel that piece of the carpet. That piece of the carpet had like 5 little squiggles on it. It turns out every one of those little squiggles in the carpet is a seer kind.
Yeah. They look like little semicolons.
Yeah. And it turns out that it were 5 different characters. It was Apolline, Jericho St. Louis, Frederick Kamel,
Nimrod, Lilia, and...
Lilia Policia and Nimrod, yeah. So Jericho is this kind of black guy, and he's holding Nimrod, who's a baby, or looks like a baby. Yeah. He's got golden eyes. Apolline is this seer kind who's got yellow teeth, kind of broken yellow teeth. She wraps herself in black, but she used to run a bordello, and she's like a widow. Frederick Gamel is this guy who's very, he's got immaculate, hair, and he's got a beard, and he's got all these, pretty dandy looking. And Lilia Policia is this beautiful woman.
And
so,
Nimrod's brother or sister also.
Yeah, Nimrod's sister. She also has golden eyes. They both belong to the family of Yemi. Jericho is Babu. Frederick Gamel is Lo, and Apolline is Aya on her mother's side, which gave her a nice singing voice.
Yeah.
So they wake up, and the scene where they wake up is very beautiful. Cal and Susanna are dreaming that these colored streaks are coming out of that carpet piece, and these colored streaks start basically painting these creatures into reality, which is another one of Clive's, typical things that, he describes the process as if he himself was painting them into the story.
Yeah.
Basically, and he's naming them because when he's describing the process where they're being unwoven into reality, there's this voice, he calls it the bees. And they name these creatures, and as he names them, they open their eyes and they wake up. So it's basically just Clive creating these creatures within the story, and giving them names and saying, "Okay, I'm dropping these guys into the story." He's like the loom in the story.
Yeah, that's a good point. And going back to Immaculata and the menstruum, something I thought of a little while back is. Well, I mean, first of all, her name, Immaculata, sort of implies, her purposely being a virgin.
Yeah, and chaste.
Being chaste.
Pure.
Yeah, and kind of like immaculate, But anyway, she suffers and goes through a lot of a lot of grief, and she sacrifices a lot to have the menstruum. But and she sort of implies that the same thing's going to happen for Susanna, but it doesn't really seem like it's negative at all for Susanna. It seems like for her, it just helps her at every turn. Yeah,
I guess it has to do with whether or not you would wield it properly or justly, I think.
Yeah, and maybe Immaculata is more powerful. I mean, she probably uses it more effectively than Susanna does.
She's more like what people would say she's a natural. Mm-hmm. She's when someone is very good at something with minimum effort, you say, "Oh, they're a natural." So I guess that's what happens with her.
Well, and Immaculata's had decades of practice.
Absolutely. And also we will find that the reason why Susanna has this power as well is because she's more than just human, right? I mean, she had a little bit of seer kind blood in her.
Yeah, her...
because Mimi Leshensky was also, Mimi Leshensky, it's implied here that Mimi Leshensky also was part seer kind.
Well, her first husband was seer kind, right? Romo.
Yeah, but Susanna's grandfather was her second husband.
Yeah.
And he was just a regular person, yeah. So, I mean, so if she has any blood on her from the seer kind, it comes from Mimi Leshensky.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, they just woke up and Cal wakes up to find these people standing around in his bedroom.
Yeah, because they're confused, right? They go like, what happens? Something's not right. Where's everything? Where's everyone? Where is the land? And they go to the window and they start looking out. The kingdom has changed. Yeah. It's dirty and it smells.
Yeah, what year is this?
Yeah, and then he asks, is it 1910 or 1911?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, give or take 80 years.
Yeah.
And they kind of get shocked by it because they're like, oh my God, 80 years? What took them so long?
Yeah.
Because they thought, it would be just a few years sleeping, and it turns out it was 80 years.
Yeah, and they thought eventually it would be safe and that people would be more accepting and...
Yeah, but safe, not because of the people, because they say that they could always hide from the people. It was the scourge that caused them to hide. And the scourge started showing up and killing some of them in 1896.
And nobody knew what the scourge looked like because everyone that ever met it got turned into basically ash and dust. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and basically they realized that these people came from the piece of carpet. Yeah. And what they did was these guys were at the edge of it because they were like the unwanted, not the unwanted, but more like the riffraff. Yeah. They were like liars, thieves, con artists.
In the children's story version, they put all the warriors on the edge because because when they get pulled off, then they fight whoever's trying to take over the carpet.
Oh, that made so much more sense, because here I was thinking there's even like a line where they decide, so should we find the carpet or should we just like make our way among the world?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a sneeze.
So their waking up triggers something in Immaculata, right? She senses that this is happening, and she's like, all right, that's it. We need to kill them right now.
Well, the thing is that right now, Shadwell and Immaculata have the fugue, and they have it in Shadwell's suite. Yeah. And she's walking around to see the carpet, and she says, "Look at that corner. Something's missing." And Shadwell's like, "Well, it's okay. It won't devalue the price because they want to set up an auction for the carpet."
Yeah.
And she says, like, "You idiot! They see every little squiggle there. That's like a seer kind." And he goes, like, "You don't mean every one of these little things?" It's like, "Yeah. So that means that there are some of the seer kind out there. Hopefully, they haven't like been unwoven, but." Like you said, she kind of senses that they have, and she's like, "We got to move."
She decides that they're going to try to stop us.
Yeah, so
we need to kill them.
And she summons a monster, the Rake. And the Rake, this is where, this is another one of the instances where we address the unified theory of the Clive Barker universe.
Yeah.
Which is, there's a reference to the Cenobites coming up.
Yeah. So the Rake was a guy named Domville, and he was one of her worshippers. And he loved her so much, and that he kept trying to reach her somehow in wherever she was, and he summoned surgeons from some netherworld is the quote.
Yeah.
And so of course surgeons from some netherworld, he was making Clive Barker had just finished Hellraiser, and he the year before had written The Hellbound Heart.
Yeah.
So yeah, surgeons from some netherworld, and he was basically sort of a floating skin that was all perforated and wounded and messed up, but still alive.
Mm-hmm. And then at the end, when he was all blood, he said to Immaculata, "Take my soul," and then she did.
Yeah.
So he became kind of like her undead slave.
Yeah, similar. He's sort of attached to her in the same way that her sisters are, except she summons him. So I don't know where he is the rest of the time, but
I would imagine that he was probably in another plane of existence, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think she goes to her shrine of mortalities because they're just sitting in the hotel or Shadwell's suite. But then she calls him the next morning and she says, "Come and see." And he goes and he sees this darkness, and he feels this heat wave, and then he sees Immaculata in the middle of the darkness, and then she says, "Look, this is the Rake." So
yeah, and
he was like he was hanging in the air like he had been like filleted like a fish and deboned, and it was like it was just like ribbons of stuff that kind of looked like a person, and he's just like floating there.
And he had sort of a living tornado around him.
Right, yeah.
So she sends the Rake to assassinate all of the Seer kind that have woken up, and Cal and Susanna. And at that point, by the time the Rake gets to their house, Susanna and a whole bunch of the Seer kind had gone off for breakfast, or they left for some reason. I can't remember what it was. And only Cal and Lilia and Nimrod and Jericho maybe were there.
Mm-hmm. Nimrod?
Yeah, I think Jericho was holding Nimrod, or Lilia was holding. Yeah, I think Jericho was holding Nimrod.
So after the scene where the Rake appears, it's the 5th chapter from the Mouths of Babes, and then it says that Dawn crept over Liverpool. Cal is watching, and then he was walking around the streets. And he's thinking about what the Seerkind said about the cuckoos, because they really trashed the humankind. They were like, "Oh, you guys are so envious. You guys were always like envious of us, and it's so unfair that you guys like change the world according to your laws, and it's like so he walks around a house, and then he sees like a woman, and he's holding like Nimrod, and Nimrod is like dressed in like one of Cal's shirts. Mm-hmm. And she says, is that your kid? And he says, well, in the manner of speaking. She says, he started banging on the window when I went past. Isn't there anyone to look after him? And he says, there is now. And she picks up the baby, and then Nimrod starts playing with her nipples through the blouse.
Oh, that neighbor lady, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, hang on. And okay, that's really not important here. But like you said, he asks Nimrod where are the others, and then he says, out, we'll go too. And then he says, just take me out. So Cal picks up Nimrod.
Yeah. So
and he asks him.
We know that Lilia is there for sure.
So after the Rake is summoned, what happens is that the Rake goes to sniff out the seer kind, and the seer kind are at this moment at Cal's house. And
not all of them.
Not all of them. Some have left, and like Nimrod is one of the ones who's there.
And Lilia is there.
And then I think that
and I think Freddy is there too. Yeah,
and Brendan, Cal's father, this is the moment where he actually tells Cal that, well, there was a letter here and I can't find it. It was a letter from your mother. And it's like, from my mother? It's like, yeah. And he was like, there was this, I lost her twice. I swear that I had a letter. It was in her handwriting. And it was from, someone who came to the door, and he gave me this gift. It was in his coat. And then he realizes that he's talking about Shadwell. And that's when he says, it was a trick, Dad. It was a disgusting trick. And then he says, like, I want to die. Mm-hmm. So...
And they look at the letter, and the words have disappeared on it, so it's just a blank piece of paper.
Right. And so at this moment...
Brendan locks himself in his room. So he doesn't.
Right.
He never meets any of these seer kind.
No, but there's this rumbling that starts showing up, and I think it's not a train. It's not one of the trains going past.
Yeah.
I think it's the Rake. It's the Rake,
and
there's this
destroying
wind.
Houses and stuff in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and Freddy is the first guy that just says, shut the door, and they decided to close it, and says, something's come after us. And it's like, what? I don't know. And Lilia was going through the kitchen, and then they see the air starts becoming so full of dirt that it's like you said, like a tornado is coming. Mm-hmm. And it's the Rake. It's the boneless beast. And
the Rake kills Lilia.
Right. The Rake kills Lilia.
And
she was standing in the ruins of the garden, her mouth open as if to shout. But, what happened next is that he kind of like wraps the wind around her and kills her, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and Cal leads because it starts to go after Nimrod. So Cal leads the Rake away and makes it chase him. And he's running and thinking... He's running towards the train tracks, and he's thinking, okay, I know these timetables. I gotta time this just right.
Yeah, which is kind of weird and kind of crazy that how he defeats the Rake, but at the same time makes sense.
It would be cool for a thing to see in a movie or TV miniseries like we talked about.
Yeah, but would it really work in the theater? Because what happens is that he attracts the Rake into the path of a train.
Well, he hears a train coming, and he's like, okay, that's the whatever bound going to this one, and it'll be here at this such and such time, and he gets the Rake run over by a train.
Yeah, but it's like, I guess there was so much noise going on because of that wind and all the debris that it was like raising up that it really didn't hear the train or something. But it would be kind of weird to see the Rake like floating around in the middle of a train track and a train coming, and the Rake is like, with his back to the train, and he doesn't hear that the train is coming.
Yeah.
So basically what happens is that, it was over in seconds. One moment the creature was on the line, its maw vast, its appetite for death vaster still, and the next the train hits it.
Yeah.
And what's left behind of the rake is just a foul stench.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. We've kind of established it's established in Weaveworld that these dead things that Immaculata can summon can die again. Good.
Well, she only gave him a little life.
Yeah.
And again, this character, the Rake, kind of reminds me also of that character in The Last Illusion. Do you remember the name of it? That creature that floats around as well and brings darkness with it.
Gosh. It's the something. What is that?
I know. I'm trying to remember it too. Hang on. I can find the name of it. There's two major monsters in The Last Illusion. One is this creature that brings darkness. The other is this creature that sings and is full of light.
That's the Castrato.
The Castrato, yeah.
But the other one, the one with the darkness.
I'm trying to remember the name. Hang on. The Last Illusion. Here it is. Okay, I'm pulling it up. I forgot.
Yeah. Well, it's okay.
Anyway, that's the character that reminds me of the Rake.
Yeah.
Is the one that chases Demur through the city where the darkness is coming, trailing behind it. So that reminds me of the Rake.
That was the scariest demon out of that story.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, for sure. So ultimately, he ends up leaving the house. Cal Mooney, Freddy, and Nimrod, they leave the house. Whatever happened to Apolline at this moment? Do you remember?
I think she decided that she wanted to go on her own in the world, and she really liked the real world, and she didn't really want to stick around everybody and try to help them get the carpet back.
Right, because she kind of like mentions that she has like deals and businesses in the world that she wants to attend to or something.
Yeah, she wants to be a prostitute, basically.
Or run a bordello.
Yeah, and Freddy is a coward. He I think he was there when the Rake showed up, and he just went and hid somewhere.
Yeah,
and
he thinks he's better than the other guys because he's like, well, these are like thieves and liars, but I'm not.
I don't know why I was
put in the border. So all right, and this is when.
But Freddy doesn't really end up being helpful in any way, I don't think.
Not really. But then, of course, the police goes in to find out what's going on at this moment, and the Inspector Hobart is the guy who starts investigating this.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yes, and that's right.
Because
and at the same time, Susanna is taking people out, like Jericho and Apolline.
Mm-hmm.
And something happens. What is it that makes them all? That makes everybody see. That makes everyone on the street see illusions, and they all go nuts and start fighting each other. That it was somebody did something, and it caught like a disease and spread to everybody. They all started seeing colors in the sky.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that scene. That scene happens where Hobart basically thinks that this is the work of anarchists because he's completely nuts. He's like
everything's totally black and white for him, and if he doesn't understand it, then it's against the law.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Isn't it like Susanna that starts something with her menstruum power?
I think it is. Yeah, I think somehow she causes that. Or she enhances something that one of the others does, and they're like, "Wait, after three, the multitude." So when that was one of Capra's tenets, right? Yeah. So when the three of them, Susanna, Jericho, and Apolline, see something, then everybody sees it, and they all go nuts and start fighting, and then they blame Jericho. Yeah. And they corner him and start beating him. And Hobart takes him in. Right. Him and Susanna. And Apolline escapes.
Right. What happens is that, like you said, Apolline, Jericho, Susanna, they start seeing people's auras or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is. And she wants to show Susanna what people look like, what cuckoos look like to them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then what happens is that Jericho, Apolline, and Susanna see it, and then all of a sudden Apolline says, "Oh no, remember the principles." And she says, Kappa's third principle states that after 3, the multitude.
Yeah.
So basically, everybody starts freaking out because they start seeing like these halos, like smoke around people's heads.
Yeah.
And they just, freak out. And basically, I think that Hobart thinks that this might have been like a chemical attack or something.
Yeah. Well,
like these anarchists.
And it's faded away by the time he got there, so he didn't even get to see it.
Yeah. The most stupid thing is when Hobart goes to investigate what the appearance of the Rake, and he says to one of the other guys, "This is England. We don't have any whirlwinds around here." And he mentions something about anarchists.
Yeah.
As if, someone had like a wind machine or something that would cause this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but basically Hobart, it plays like those mean, crazy, black and white kind of people, like those inspectors that were like, that were leading those witch hunts about the IRA and stuff like that they would end up like torturing people just to find other terrorists.
Yeah.
And ultimately become monsters themselves because they're just doing things that are against the law. But they justify it by saying that, I'm just doing this because I'm for justice and, I'm one of the good guys, but he's still doing like bad things.
Yeah. Yeah, in the name of the law, just because it's like I believe in one thing and that's the law, and like I don't have religion, this is what I've got.
Right. Because he says something like, "This is England. We don't have whirlwinds." And and his guy says, "Well, something did this. Somebody, Bryn, anarchists." Yeah, they're like rats. These people. You find a poison that does the job, and they learn how to get fat on it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to begin again. So he thinks it's probably like IRA terrorists or something like that.
Yeah.
And and then, of course, Apolline does that thing where she shows Susanna about how the cuckoos look like, and that spreads out and causes some kind of like lunacy among the people. And they have to run away, and because people are like, make him stop.
And they say it's him. He's the one that did it. And they point at Jericho, and they corner him, start beating him. Hobart comes in and breaks it up and takes Jericho and Susanna to jail.
Yeah, and she ends up being, interrogated by Hobart.
Yeah.
And
they've beaten Jericho some more, actually, in the interrogation.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah, they take them to Hobart's headquarters, and by this point, they pretty much, they're going to torture them. Mm. And I'm Hobart. We got some talking to do.
Yeah.
And then it says, Susanna could no longer see even the merest shadow of a halo, but she knew even before he sat down in front of her the color of this man's soul. It gave her no comfort.
Yeah.
Well, we guess it's black.
Yeah.
So by this time, we go back to Shadwell, and Shadwell is setting up the auction.
Yeah.
He's gathered a few
rich people. Paul van Nieuwkerk, the guy who owns the finest collection of erotic in the world outside the walls of the Vatican. Yeah.
Margaret Pierce, who had, with the death of her parents, inherited at the tender age of 19 one of the largest personal fortunes in Europe. Beauclerk Norris, the Hamburger King, whose companies own small states. Oil billionaires, Leon Devereaux from Johannesburg, guy who is in the gold business, and another unnamed guy who had his face like toyed with by surgeons.
Yeah, and these people are not famous rich people. They're the people behind the rich people, in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So these are the people that are so rich that, they pretty much run things from the shadows.
Yeah.
They don't have to mix with commoners.
Kind of like Whitehead in the Damnation game, but I guess he was more of a public figure.
Yeah. So basically, they're all there, and they're like, "Is this really real? So is this really the fugue?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah." And one of them walks over and he touches the carpet, and Shadowwell goes like, "Careful, it's volatile." Yeah. Hey, just like the blood of Baphomet, right?
Yeah.
So he says, "What do you mean? The fugue wants to show itself. It's ready and waiting." And of course, we know that something's about to go down, and it's gonna be fantastic. And basically, they start the auction, and he goes like, "Shall we begin?" Which echoes to me like the words of Pinhead.
Yeah, and while Cal and while Susanna and Jericho were in jail, Cal and who went with him? Was he just by himself? He went to go to the auction.
I think he is by himself at this moment, right? Or is he with Freddie Kamel?
He might, maybe he is with Freddie, but I can't remember. How did he figure out about the auction? Somebody told him.
I know that he makes his way with Kamel and Apolline, and they're trying to compute the carpet's location.
Oh, yeah, they're using a rapture or something to figure it out, I think, right?
Right. They're like, this is a lot of hard work. Apolline is concentrating, trying to discover where the carpet is. And she's using the giddies. So she's using something called the giddies. And finally, they follow the trail of echoes that leads them across the Mersey, through Birkenhead, and over Irby Hill to the vicinity of Thurtiston Common, which is where Apolline announces, "It's here, stop." So basically they're trying to figure out, okay, so what are our tactics? And they just
go in.
Go in, take the carpet, bugger off again. That sounds like a good strategy. It's just like that joke that's like how to draw good. And it's like, make a circle. Now draw the eye, add the details. Now you got the Mona Lisa. So, okay. So basically, Nimrod's a baby. So that's useful. They just, he gets into places they can't get through. So he opens the door for them.
Oh, yeah.
And they crash the auction. Meanwhile, they have to confront Immaculata's sisters, I think.
Yeah.
And
something happens to Freddie at this point.
Freddie, yeah.
Frederick.
I'm trying to remember. Frederick Kamel.
Yeah.
What happens to
There's
Freddie?
Something on the staircase, I think, or.
Yeah, isn't there? And then the guests start listening to some disturbance and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And then Shadwell says, "Someone was trying to steal the carpet." And Freddie. He's Freddie. Yeah, Cal all of a sudden finds Freddie and Apolline on the floor, and I think they were attacked by Immaculata's sisters.
Oh, okay. That's right.
If I recall, in a kitchen.
I think they cut open Freddie's stomach, right? Or something like
that. He's wounded. And so basically he says, Cal, he's calling out to Cal and says, "Yeah, I'm right here, Freddie."
Actually, he was wounded with a knife, I think, right?
Yes, he was wounded with a knife.
Yeah, because this knife is important. It plays a role in
it's going to play a role in a little bit.
Yeah.
So he sees that he's trying to tell Cal that, Cal, come here. And it's like, looks up, and then all of a sudden Immaculata is lying on the ceiling, staring down at them.
Yeah, kind of like Nyx in Lord of Illusions.
Yeah.
Looking down at them from, hanging up on the ceiling using magic, and he sort of floats down. Right.
Then all of a sudden Shadwell walks in and says, "What is this?" And, because Cal just kind of like tried to escape Immaculata, and he kind of like, because she's like flailing at him with her claws, and he like stumbles and he walks into the auction, the middle of the auction. And of course, at this moment, Cal finds himself standing on the carpet. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, and he gets this weird feeling that he's like safe. And of course, the buyers start, getting antsy because Shadwell just told them that someone was trying to steal the carpet, and they're ready to spend a lot of money on it. And they're like, "Get him out of here!"
And before this part, Susanna and Jericho were in jail, and Susanna used her menstruum to escape. She sort of threw chairs around and trashed the place and just scared the crap out of all of the police. Like they were actually just they took all their clothes off and were playing with their own feces and just sort of gibbering and she broke Jericho out and they left.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they make their way to the auction at this point.
Yeah. And meanwhile at the auction, all hell is breaking loose because they're getting ready to, like, the buyers they don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. They're getting really restless. They're like, "Who's this guy? What's he doing here? Is this like some kind of trick? Get him out of here." And some of the Sirkine are wounded in the kitchen. Immaculata is trying to kill Cal. Shadwell's trying to distract everybody by opening up his jacket and saying, "You see anything you like?" So it's like that moment where everything is in chaos, and all of a sudden, Nimrod is trying to signal Cal, and Cal says, "The carpet, we have to wake it." And Immaculata is walking, the Incantatrix is walking towards Cal as Shadwell is, distracting the buyers, and she's getting ready to kill him. And what happens is that Cal only has a few seconds to understand what was going to happen. And Cal's fingers touch the fugue, and he stabs the fugue with a knife. Yeah,
and I think at this point Susanna was there, right? And somehow she had used the menstruum to help.
Right. Because after she broke out of the police station, she manages to find the auction.
And so somehow, I think, did she guide the knife, or somehow they cut just the right thread to unweave the entire carpet?
Well, she's using the menstruum to attack Immaculata, and the knife is like being held between them, like kind of a battle of the wits, right?
Yeah.
The knife is spinning around, and all of a sudden, the knife kind of drops out of the air, and sticks down into the carpet just in the right spot.
Yeah.
And it severed one of the strands that held the whole weave together, and the line that is really, really interesting, this line, is that it was the end of the world and the beginning of worlds. I mean, as in this world is about to spring into being.
Yeah.
And basically, the weave comes undone. The fugue releases itself into the world, and it's a really beautiful moment,
and
because
it overlaps over the top of our world. And, and it figures out as it's sort of unweaving, and overlapping. It's figuring out ways to sort of insinuate itself around the world of ours, so it doesn't just destroy everything and put itself in its place. It sort of melds together with our world.
Yeah, it kind of overlaps with our world, and it starts like spreading out over the room. It fills the room, then it moves forward, and the buyers make their escape. Cal tries to make it to the door. Shadwell is trying to, he's mad as hell, and he's trying to kill him.
All he
draws
cared
a gun.
about was the sale. That was like his ultimate goal. I mean, his goal was way different from Immaculata's, but this was his, most proud moment, and Cal ruined it for him. He
wanted to sell the carpet a miracle. He wanted to sell Wonderland.
Yeah.
And he takes out a gun and is like, you interfering bastard. And he takes out a gun. Nobody crosses me, Mooney. Yeah. And then he fires at Cal.
Yeah.
And it was Nimrod. Nimrod saves Cal. And so everything is shaking. Everything is like rumbling. The rapture is undoing itself. And
I think we're at the end of book 1, right?
Book 1, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, all the fragments of the loom are spiraling out like fireworks and like colored filaments of brightness. And so it ends right here. And the first book ends right here. And basically Cal is just being taken away by the shockwave, and he like gives in, lets go, and he just
he wants to and decides to go on a trip and start exploring. Yeah.
So of course when he opens his eyes, he sees the fugue spread out. Yeah. It's a beautiful moment. So I guess we'll pick it up from here on the next call.
You can reach us on the web at www.clivebarkercast.com. We're on iTunes. You can leave us a review, or lots of other places where podcasts are aggregated. We have a Facebook page, and of course there's always the Occupy Midian group. On Twitter, we're at BarkerCast and at Occupy Midian. The forum is www.clivebarkerfans.com/forum. And the theme was by Colin Lakativa. So this was part one. Obviously, we couldn't fit talking about the whole book into one episode, so it's going to continue on here in a few days. But yeah, if you have any feedback or questions, or you would like to be a guest, let us know.